After the Night King left Kevin's apartment, he got a call from Miss Wilson to tell him about a banquet he needed to attend as a representative of Williams Media. She insisted that it would help the company's image if he showed up for it. But Kevin really wanted to practice the techniques that the Night King had spent the past 2 weeks teaching him. "You're not giving me much of a choice," Kevin told her. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Please don't misunderstand me, Mr. Williams. I didn't mean to pressure you," she replied anxiously. "Just stop by at Corwin Tower to pick me up later," Kevin said as he hung up the phone. At the same moment, Lily had just finished her live broadcast and was walking out of her home studio with a broad smile. It had been 2 weeks since Mighty Moose had tipped her tens of thousands of dollars during her show. This had attracted a lot more viewers, and the popularity of her live broadcast skyrocketed. "You must be tired, Lily. Do you want some fruit?" Dorothy asked as she smiled and walked her daughter to the sofa to sit down. Lily had been the only wage earner in the house lately, and it made Dorothy happy to see her daughter doing so well. "I'd like to discuss something with you," Dorothy said. "Now that you're a celebrity, why don't you buy a bigger place? It would be more convenient for your live streams if we had some extra room." Dorothy wasn't worried about upsetting Lily when she said, "And when that piece of trash Kevin gets out of prison, he won't be able to find us." Lily was making at least $100,000 a day on the Williams payroll, plus whatever her fans sent her. She could easily afford a new place. When she thought about Kevin, Lily's eyes started to well up with tears. "Do you have a particular place in mind?" she asked her mother. "I heard that the Salix Leaf Hotel complex that Rachel is managing has just finished some new condos," Dorothy said with a smile. "I saw some ads for them yesterday, and they're really beautiful." Lily had also heard about the condos that were being built next to the Salix Leaf Hotel, and she liked the idea. It was probably the best location in Chicago, and the buildings were gorgeous. Some people even thought they were nicer than the condos in Corwin Tower. But they were still very expensive and cost more than double what you would pay in other parts of the city. "It's nice, but isn't it a little pricey?" Lily asked hesitantly. "Well, let's find out," Dorothy said as she called Rachel. As soon as the call connected, Dorothy got right to the point. "Hi, Rachel. We're wondering if there are any more condos left at your property." "Yes, we still have a few. If you're interested, come down and take a look. I'll show them to you myself. It will give me a chance to stretch my legs," Rachel replied with a smile. "Okay, we'll be down there in a little while." Then Dorothy hung up the phone and let Lily know that it was all set before going to the other room to change. Less than an hour later, they both arrived at the sales office and saw Rachel waiting for them by the door. "You're getting prettier every time I see you, Rachel," Dorothy said with a smile. "Oh, please don't flatter me. Now let me show you our condos," Rachel said as she took Lily by the arm. "Wait a second. How can I be seen with the most desirable single woman in Chicago?" Lily asked with a mischievous grin. "What's Lily talking about?" Rachel said to Dorothy as she reached out and playfully pinched Lily's arm. "She's just teasing you," Dorothy laughed. Rachel was now very famous all across Chicago, and they were constantly hounding her for TV and fashion magazine interviews. A few minutes later, when they got to the condominium area of the property, Lily and Dorothy were amazed. There was a large artificial lake by the entrance to the magnificent building, along with tennis courts and a high-end supermarket. The place was packed with people who were interested in buying one of the condos. Rachel told them that each place had its own private swimming pool, but there was also a health club if you were interested. "Our goal was to make this neighborhood self-sufficient. Everything you need is right here on the property," Rachel said in a slightly promotional tone. Just as she was about to take Lily and Dorothy to see the rest of the facilities, a Rolls-Royce limousine pulled up at the entrance. Alan and Susan got out of the car with the help of the driver, but they were dressed in such ordinary clothing that everyone stopped to watch. They looked like they didn't fit in, not just the car, but the entire complex. A moment later, a few women quickly ran out of the building. 2 of them took some bags of groceries out of the Rolls-Royce's trunk, and the other stood beside Kevin's parents. Miss Wilson had arranged for all this while Kevin was recovering from his injuries. She got in touch with Rachel and requested that she reserve the best condo in the place for Alan and Susan so they could move in after they were discharged from the hospital. "I thought we'd see someone with class, but it's just that loafer's trashy parents," Dorothy said with a mocking smile as she walked toward them. "Mom, what are you doing? You're embarrassing me," Lily cried out as she tried to stop her mother. Rachel didn't understand what was going on, and she watched the scene awkwardly. She was thinking to herself, "Aren't these Kevin's parents? They're related to Dorothy, so why is she acting like they're bitter enemies?" Alan barely looked at Dorothy, and Susan ignored her completely as they walked into the building with the help of the two women. "What are you doing? Don't you know how expensive this place is? You'll just get it dirty," Dorothy reprimanded them harshly. "What did you say?" Alan replied in an unfriendly tone of voice. "You know what I'm talking about. Your useless son is still in jail, and you won't be able to live here much longer," Dorothy sneered. "Leave me alone. My son is innocent," Alan angrily retorted. Alan and Susan hadn't talked to Kevin about it yet, but they knew their son wouldn't do such a horrible thing. There was something fishy about the whole matter. "My daughter was foolish to marry someone as worthless as that trash son of yours," Dorothy complained. Susan saw that her husband was getting angry and said softly, "Alan, let's go inside. We can't just get along with someone like this." She didn't understand how someone who looked so elegant could always say such rotten things. "I'm coming," Alan replied as he turned around and walked into the building and headed toward their elevator. He was too tired to deal with Dorothy. "You should have stayed on your dirty old farm," Dorothy said with a sneer. "Do you really let people like them live here?" Dorothy asked Rachel with a perplexed look on her face. Then Dorothy added, "I want the condo they're staying in. Get someone to chase Kevin's parents out so we can move in." "I'm very sorry, Dorothy. They bought their condo 10 days ago. Why don't you take a look at a different one?" Rachel tried to explain. This was a very embarrassing situation. "They actually live here? How is that even possible?" Dorothy asked in disbelief. Lily also looked at Rachel in shock. She didn't know Alan and Susan well, but she more or less knew their financial situation. "How much did they pay? We'll offer more," Dorothy offered impatiently. "I'm sorry, Dorothy, but I can't do that," Rachel said very apologetically. "You're the vice president of this place. What do you mean you can't do that?" Dorothy asked indignantly. "There's nothing I can do about it. Before the building was complete, I was told to reserve the best unit for Mr. and Mrs. Williams," Rachel said as she smiled awkwardly. Then she offered, "There are a lot of other units still available with beautiful views and amenities. Why don't we go look at them?" "Who told you to do that?" Lily suddenly asked. But Lily had already thought of one possibility. It obviously had something to do with Kevin, but she shuddered to think of who might have helped them. Since when did Kevin know someone who was so powerful? "Lily, please don't make things so difficult for me," Rachel begged her. She was afraid of revealing Kevin's true identity. Lily lightly nodded her head as she thought about Rachel's difficult position, but she still wondered, could it be Dalton Steele? But Lily was actually interested in living in the best condo in the building. The location was great and it was close to transportation, plus it would only increase in value. It was nearly 6 o'clock, and almost all of Chicago's upper crust would soon be arriving at the banquet at the Salix Leaf Hotel. It was a highly anticipated event to kick off the Foreign Film Festival. There was a lot of commotion because Williams Media had announced that their CEO would be there in person, and everyone knew that the CEO, whoever they were, had a close relationship with Mitchell Cook and other prominent Chicagoans. Nobody wanted to miss this event. Plus, they were aware of everything that Williams Media had done to help straighten out the recent economic crisis. They had even gotten the KWTD Corporation to help the city, and they had spent a fortune to protect Chicago's economy. So the reputation of Williams Media had grown exponentially, but what everyone really wanted was to kiss up to the company's CEO. At 6:30, a long black Porsche Panamera stretch limo pulled up at the entrance of the hotel. When Brittany and Charity got out of the car, the crowd roared. The place was jumping, and paparazzi were swarming Williams Media's latest stars. The crowd was clamoring for autographs and shouting how much they loved them both. While everyone was focused on Britney and Charity, a well-dressed man in sunglasses stepped out of the limo and accompanied the two women as they walked toward the hotel's entrance. At first, a lot of people thought that he was their bodyguard. Then they started to realize that he was probably Williams Media's CEO. Under the watchful eyes of Britney and Charity's fans, Kevin guided them through the throng, stopping now and then to exchange a few words with some of the onlookers. A lot of very prominent people were doing their best to make a good impression on him, pushing through the crowd to offer him projects and invite him to dine with them. Kevin smiled politely and chatted with a few of them as he and his companions continued to make their way to the banquet. Just then, the three of them heard someone call to Britney, "Long time no see, my dear. I miss you so much." They all looked over and saw a young man holding a glass of wine with an evil smile on his face. He was walking over toward Britney. Kevin frowned slightly when he saw the man. "I didn't expect to meet you here, my sweet. Would you like to have a long talk with me tonight?" The man smiled lewdly. "Sorry, I'm not free this evening," Britney replied coldly. "Are you so busy these days that you don't have time for me? You know advertising is very important in this business," the man said conceitedly. The rude man thought that Kevin was just Britney's bodyguard, so he didn't pay any attention to him. "So you're the one who did it?" Britney said as her smile turned into a scowl. "So what if I did?" Vito Booker said arrogantly. "I told you last time we met that no woman I like can reject me if they want to keep working in the entertainment industry." Then Vito continued with a lascivious look in his eyes. "But you know I can always change my mind if you're willing to change yours." This infuriated Britney. If she hadn't been so worried about offending the man, she would have poured her glass of wine over his head. Kevin had finally had enough of this and said, "Someone should do something about this stray dog. Chicago has leash laws, you know." He didn't really care what the guy might say to him. When Kevin arrived at the banquet with Britney and Charity, everyone thought he was just their bodyguard. Then some of them realized he was the CEO of Williams Media. As they got near the entrance while all the paparazzi were snapping photos, Vito Booker got Britney's attention and tried to pressure her to go out with him. Kevin didn't hesitate to insult the man. Vito's facial expression changed instantly. He stared at Kevin fiercely and said, "Who the hell are you talking to? Don't think that you're just special because you're at Britney's side. You're just a stinking bodyguard." "Please show more respect, Mr. Booker. You're talking to the CEO of Williams Media," Charity informed him. "What the hell are you talking about? Your CEO is just a spoiled brat who isn't even old enough to grow a beard," Vito sneered. "And what's he doing wearing sunglasses at night? His future doesn't look that bright to me." "And you don't know how to keep your mouth shut," Kevin said angrily. Actually, Kevin had decided to wear sunglasses so that no one could recognize him. He'd almost pulled it off until he ran into this dumbass Vito Booker. "What the hell did you say?" Vito replied furiously. "So what if you're the head of Williams Media? How many connections could a brat who's still wet behind the ears have anyway?" Then Vito got in Kevin's face and shoved his finger in his chest as he shouted, "I'm not afraid to tell you this. If you know what's good for you, you'll turn Britney over to me right now. Otherwise, Williams Media will disappear from the entertainment industry in a New York minute." The altercation attracted a lot of attention, but no one came forward to stop him. First of all, they knew how much influence Vito had, and second of all, no one knew how powerful Kevin was, so they wisely chose to stay out of it. "If you want to keep your finger, you'll take it back right now," Kevin said coldly. He hated having people scold him like that. "Who do you think you are?" Vito said indignantly as he handed his glass of wine to the woman who was standing at his side. Two burly men immediately walked over and stood next to him. They were security experts that he had spent a large amount of money to hire. "There are too many people out here. If you have the guts, follow me to the men's room," Vito said with a confident sneer. "No problem. Do you really think I'm afraid of you?" Kevin retorted. "It just so happens that I have a score to settle with you." Kevin had been wondering why Britney was so popular but couldn't get any advertising contracts lately. It was only when he heard Vito threaten her that he understood the source of the problem. "If you knew any better, you'd be very afraid right now. But if you're foolish enough to face me, I'll be waiting for you," Vito warned him. Then he left with his men. When the crowd saw this, they all shook their heads. Kevin had led Williams Media brilliantly lately, but he was still very young and they knew how powerful Vito was. In the entire entertainment industry, nobody dared to stand up to him, so a lot of bystanders were worried about the future of Williams Media. It would be a shame for the leading company in Chicago to collapse just like that. However, Kevin wasn't afraid at all. He'd been dealt a good hand, but he just hadn't shown all his cards to the public yet. Also, Kevin could tell that Vito's 2 bodyguards would be no match for him. He could beat them with one hand tied behind his back. "Please, Kevin, don't go." Brittany tugged on Kevin's arm and pleaded with him as he started walking towards the men's room to fight with Vito. "Kevin, listen to me. Don't let your emotions affect your decisions. The Booker Phoenix Corporation is very powerful in the entertainment industry. We don't want to start any conflict with them," Charity said as she also tried to persuade him. Although she had only been involved in the entertainment industry for a short time, Charity had a general understanding of the situation. She knew very well that Vito wasn't someone you should provoke. "Kevin, let's just forget about it," Brittany urged him. She thought that Kevin was only doing this to stand up for her. "It's okay. We're all adults here. But don't worry. We're not going to fight in a public place like this," Kevin said casually. Before Brittany and Charity could say anything else, Kevin had already headed to the restroom, which made the 2 women very anxious. When he walked through the door, Kevin saw Vito lighting up a cigar. His 2 goons were standing next to him. Then Vito looked at Kevin fearlessly and said, "Since you're the CEO of Williams Media, you must be a reasonable man. Well, I can be reasonable too. We both know you were wrong, so why don't you just apologize and let me have Brittany? Then we can forget this whole thing ever happened." "Jackass!" Kevin growled as he glared at Vito. Then he walked past him to one of the stalls. "You don't know what's good for you, do you?" Vito snarled as he threw a cigar on the floor. His 2 bodyguards moved in to attack Kevin. "Go ahead, but you're only going to embarrass yourselves," Kevin said calmly as he reached out and quickly grabbed one of the men by the wrist. When he twisted it, the sound of bones breaking echoed throughout the tiled room. The man screamed in pain and dropped to his knees. Kevin tossed him aside and stopped the other man's fist at the same time. He redirected the blow to throw the man against the wall. He struck it so hard that he knocked some of the tiles loose. Before the man could react, Kevin grabbed him and threw him so hard that he flew across the bathroom and slammed into Vito. "Get off me, you clumsy bastard!" Vito roared as he tried to push his bodyguard off of him. But as soon as Vito got to his feet, Kevin turned around and kicked him in the gut. This sent him sprawling on the bathroom floor where he just lay there in a daze. Kevin put his foot on Vito's back and asked him sarcastically, "Are you having fun yet, Vito?" "Damn it!" Vito roared at his bodyguards. "What the hell am I paying you guys for?" The 2 men were in such pain they struggled to stand up. When they were about to attack Kevin again, he calmly asked them, "Do you really want to go through that again?" Hearing this, the 2 of them stopped in their tracks and looked at Kevin with fear in their eyes. They had never felt such power. "You're both useless," Vito said as he fought with all his strength to stand up. However, Kevin was still holding him down with his foot, and in frustration he yelled, "You bastard! Williams Media is finished now, and so are you." "Is that so?" Kevin replied as he bent down and lifted Vito off the ground. "And just how are you going to do that?" Then Kevin punched Vito in the stomach, making the man's face twist in agony. "Have you ever had a swirly?" Kevin said as he kicked open the door to one of the toilet stalls. He dragged Vito straight into it. "What are you going to do, you son of a bitch?" Vito gritted his teeth and roared. "You'll know soon," Kevin answered as he grabbed Vito by the hair and shoved his head into the bowl. What made it worse was that the water had that blue disinfectant in it. Vito struggled desperately to pull his face out of the toilet bowl. Kevin suddenly let go of the man's head and took a step back. Vito was relieved to get some air. He turned around and yelled at Kevin with hatred in his eyes. You're a dead man. Vito stood there with his smug face and his designer suit dripping from blue toilet water, wishing he could cut Kevin into pieces. He'd never suffered such humiliation since the day he was born. What are you still standing there for? If this guy doesn't die right now, then I'll damn sure kill the two of you, Vito shouted at his bodyguards. Some of the blue toilet water must have dripped into Vito's mouth. It tasted so disgusting that he immediately puked. After hearing this threat to their lives, the two goons overcame their fear of Kevin and attacked him again. Don't say I didn't warn you. Kevin growled as he moved to meet their attack. He grabbed the first man by the head and bounced him off the bathroom wall. Then he kneed the guy between the legs. The man's eyes rolled up into his head and he dropped to the floor. It hurt so much he couldn't even scream. Kevin didn't stop there. He quickly turned around and kicked the other man in the crotch, dropping him to the floor in the fetal position. Finally, Kevin walked back over to Vito. He plugged his nose and said, "You know, Mr. Booker, you really could use a bath." "Just wait and see. You're a dead man," Vito growled. "I know. You already said that a minute ago. This is getting kind of boring," Kevin said as he kneed Vito in the crotch. He immediately dropped to the floor and growled, "You son of a bitch." "Such language," Kevin said mockingly. "You know, I think I need to wash your mouth out." Then Kevin grabbed Vito by the collar and pushed his head into the toilet again. While this was going on, Brittany and Charity were anxiously waiting outside the bathroom door. When they heard all the screaming, they were tempted to rush in. "Charity, why don't we just go inside and take a look?" Brittany said in a soft voice. "But it's the men's room and there are so many people around," Charity said hesitantly. Even though she said that, she was very worried about Kevin. "But we really can't wait any longer," Brittany said anxiously. She really wanted to make sure that Kevin was all right. Charity took a deep breath and seemed to have made up her mind. "Let's go." The two women looked around and opened the men's room door. "Mr. Williams, are you okay?" Brittany asked worriedly as she entered the room. But when they saw the scene in the bathroom, their jaws almost dropped to the floor. Vito's entire upper body was stained with blue toilet water. He was draped across the toilet bowl, moaning in pain. His two bodyguards were lying on the floor, writhing around. Kevin was just standing casually in front of one of the urinals, whistling while he peed. Vito's goons had interrupted him when he walked in the room earlier. "What the heck are you two doing in here?" Kevin asked when he saw the women. Charity and Brittany were stunned for a second before they both let out a scream. Even though he was facing the other way, they covered their eyes and ran out. They were both thinking the same thing. "We really shouldn't have gone in there. How embarrassing." "Do you still want to keep playing this game, Vito?" Kevin asked coldly as he walked over to the man. Please let me go. It's all my fault. I won't bother Brittany anymore," Vito sobbed. He wasn't only afraid of more pain and humiliation, Vito was genuinely afraid for his life. But he had also decided that once he got out of there, he would find a way to destroy Williams Media and make Kevin pay for this beating. "Why weren't you this cooperative earlier?" Kevin said as he shook his head and walked out of the men's room. When he got back to the hotel lobby, Kevin looked around, but he couldn't find Brittany and Charity. "Damn it," Kevin said to himself. "Now I also smell like disinfectant." He wished he could change his clothes. Kevin took out his phone to send a text to Brittany as he was heading toward the door. On the way, he accidentally bumped into a woman and dropped his phone. As he stooped down to pick his phone up off the floor, he heard someone scolding him. "Why don't you watch where you're going?" the woman snarled coldly. "Do you know how expensive my clothes are? Could you even afford to have them cleaned?" "Well, didn't you also bump into me?" Kevin said in amazement. "What kind of security guard are you? How dare you blame Miss Maya Hughes after bumping into her? Do you want to lose your job?" The woman's assistant berated him. "You're threatening my job," Kevin said calmly. "I've never heard of Maya Hughes. Are you sure she could make me lose my job?" "Where are you from? You don't know who Miss Hughes is?" the assistant replied coldly. "Have you heard of the Booker Phoenix Corporation? She's the most popular celebrity in all of Booker Phoenix." Kevin laughed when he heard this. Whoever this woman was, she was only one of their clients. After what he just did to Vito Booker, why would he be afraid of one of the man's underlings? This was turning into quite a fun evening. When Kevin left the men's room of the Salix Leaf Hotel after beating up Vito and his men, he didn't see Charity or Brittany anywhere, so he pulled out his phone to text Brittany but bumped into a woman. She turned out to be Maya Hughes, one of Booker Phoenix's clients, and she was very snooty to him. She thought he was a bodyguard and threatened to have him fired. "So, the Booker Phoenix Corporation is really that powerful?" Kevin asked her. Their raised voices started to draw a small crowd. The people who were watching their argument were shocked to hear Kevin talking to her like that. They knew how important she was in the entertainment industry. Maya was so angry that her voice started to tremble. "Is there something wrong with you? Don't you have any manners?" She was scheduled to go on stage and sing a few of her new songs later, but had lost her diamond bracelet. When Kevin bumped into her, she was anxiously looking for it. Kevin seemed like a good target for her to vent her anger. Just then, Vito limped out of the men's room with some help from his bodyguards. He'd cleaned himself off, but he still smelled pretty horrible. Needless to say, he was no longer in the mood for a banquet. He was actually heading to the hospital to see if he needed to get his stomach pumped and to make sure he didn't have any permanent injuries. On the way to the exit, he was stopped by Maya, who called him over urgently. "Mr. Booker, please come help me." As Maya walked up to Vito, she picked up on his awful smell. She immediately covered her mouth and nose in disgust and subconsciously took a step back. "What's wrong?" Vito asked awkwardly. She really just wanted to vent her anger some more. "This oaf of a security guard knocked me over and then said it was my fault." "I'll teach the guy a lesson," Vito replied as he started to get angry. Just about everyone in the entertainment industry knew that Vito was a lech. He'd had an affair with just about every female client who worked with his company. Maya was next on his list, even though she didn't know it yet. "That's great, Vito," Maya said as her face lit up. She turned around and pointed at Kevin, who was standing nearby. "It's that blockhead." "Him?" Vito asked awkwardly. His bodyguards were as stunned as he was. Vito obviously hadn't gotten over what had just happened in the men's room. After all, he was on the way to the hospital to get checked out. "Mr. Booker, I think there must be something wrong with how your company manages its clients. They can be very rude," Kevin said with a sneer. The onlookers were shocked to hear him say this and started whispering to each other. Maya put her hands on her hips and said, "Vito, I want you to do something about this right now. If you don't throw him out in the street immediately, I'll be too upset to go on stage." "Shut up," he interrupted her. "Him again," Vito thought to himself. "I'd better not provoke the guy right now. I'll get my revenge later." "Why are you being so mean to me, Vito? It was clearly his fault," Maya said in confusion. Vito was usually so friendly to her. Why was he scolding her to defend a lowly security guard? Seeing Kevin smile at him, Vito took a deep breath, and while still feeling the pain from the beating he'd just gotten, he put his hand on Maya's shoulder and walked her over to Kevin. "Do you know who this person is?" Vito snarled. "This is the CEO of Williams Media. You're messing with the wrong guy. Just hurry up and apologize to Mr. Williams. And if he doesn't accept your apology, we're canceling your contract," Vito explained to her. Maya felt her legs grow weak. She suddenly realized that she'd been insulting someone very important for her career, not just some random security guard. "I'm sorry, sir. I really shouldn't have spoken to you like that," Maya said meekly. Everyone who saw this happen started to chatter. When they realized that Kevin was actually one of the guests of honor at the banquet, they felt extremely lucky to see him in person. But some of them were still shocked that Kevin had been able to unnerve Vito like that. "I don't have time for people like you," Kevin said calmly as he walked out of the hotel lobby. Now Vito really wanted to get revenge. A few minutes later, Kevin got to the underground parking garage. Suddenly, he felt someone hit him from behind and he blacked out. A while later, Kevin opened his eyes again. He was surprised to see that he was in handcuffs. He was even more surprised to see Gwen Archer sitting on the sofa holding a glass of red wine. "So, you're finally awake," Gwen said to him as she swirled the wine in her glass. "Miss Archer, why have you done this? Have you forgotten that I saved your life?" Kevin asked her. He was bewildered by the whole situation. It's true that you saved my life, but I also gave you the ingredients that you used for the pill that helped you make so much progress. So as I see it, we're even, Gwen said with a straight face. Okay, Kevin replied. As long as our debt is settled, then what am I doing here? Do you have a crush on me? Kevin asked playfully. A second later, Gwen threw her glass of wine in Kevin's face. Are you sure you don't know, or are you just pretending not to know? Gwen asked as she stood up and looked down at Kevin. That's some good wine, Kevin said pleasantly. Chateau Lafite Rothschild 1982, isn't it? My brother sent his men to catch Dalton Steele's wife Miranda, but you stopped them just when they were about to get their hands on her, Gwen explained as she took a knife off the side table and pointed it at Kevin. Then she continued, I didn't know you were this bold. Did you think you could get away with interfering in Archer family business? Kevin frowned as he looked at the knife in her hand. Dalton's like a brother to me, and your people attacked his wife right in front of me. What was I supposed to do? I expected you to stay out of our affairs, she answered coldly. They were both silent for a moment. Kevin knew that Gwen wasn't the kind of person to make empty threats. Finally, it was Kevin who broke the silence. Gwen, don't get carried away. Just because I'm in cuffs, do you think you can do whatever you want with me? Not only did you ruin my brother's plans, but you also injured dozens of our people. Tell me, who got carried away? Gwen asked as she moved her knife even closer to Kevin. If you have the strength to fight back, you should do it now. Otherwise, you'll find out what happens to people who challenge me, Gwen threatened him. I guess I don't have a choice, Kevin said as he took a deep breath and focused his energy. The handcuffs burst from his wrists, and Gwen took a few steps back in astonishment. She almost fell to the floor and her knife skittered across the room. When she stood up again, Kevin was holding the night dagger to her throat. Her henchmen should really have done a better job of searching him. If you have the guts, then go ahead and kill me, she said fearlessly. But keep this in mind. This is my private estate. There are dozens of guards on the property. If they don't hear from me in 2 hours, they'll rush in here and you won't stand a chance against them. Don't try to scare me. Anyway, I'm sure your life is worth more than mine, Kevin said grimly. Are you threatening my life? Gwen interrupted him angrily. Wait a second. I didn't ask to come here. You kidnapped me, Kevin said calmly. The atmosphere in the room suddenly got very tense. Gwen just stared at Kevin, unsure as what to do next. For one thing, she had just seen Kevin's power and focus, so she wasn't going to act rashly. After a long pause, Gwen broke the silence and said, I know I can't do anything to you, but you also wouldn't dare to hurt me. How about we make a deal? Gwen asked him coolly. What do you have in mind? Kevin replied nonchalantly. Thanks to the herbal medicines he discovered, there were few people who could hurt him now, in Chicago or even in the entire country. My brother Dominic told me that you sold him a special pill and then gave another one to Quinn, Gwen said as she started to get a greedy look in her eyes. But I'll bet you still have another one. Are you telling me that you went to all this trouble just for that? Kevin said with a smirk. That's right. As long as you give me the pill, I'll pretend that nothing happened today, and I'll guarantee that you can leave here safely, Gwen offered. That's all you want? Kevin asked as he reached into his pocket and pulled one out. Give it to me now, she said excitedly. Although Gwen had been training for years, she felt blocked and wasn't making any improvement. Her current level of stamina and focus had helped her expand her business enormously, but she needed something more to get an edge on her competition. When Dominic had told her about all the progress he'd made with Kevin's help, she was obsessed with getting one of the pills for herself. But in spite of all her efforts, she'd come up empty-handed. Then she missed the auction that the Pearl family had held, and she was devastated. It just seemed out of reach, even though she would have been willing to spend 10 times what the old gentleman had. Now she saw what she'd been looking for so long, and it was in Kevin's hand. What she didn't expect was for him to casually pop it in his mouth. This instantly made Gwen furious. She wanted to tear Kevin limb from limb. Why did you do that? Gwen roared wildly. You're already too far advanced for it to do anything to help you. What a waste. Suddenly, Kevin saw a flash of steel in front of his eyes. Gwen had pulled a sword from the display stand behind the couch. Kevin moved nimbly and stepped into her blind spot, taking her balance and getting control of the sword, which he took from her hands and threw against the wall, shattering it into pieces. Gwen was furious and shouted, "I'm going to kill you!" As it turns out, the sword was very important to her. She'd found it years ago and had gone to a lot of trouble and expense to make it hers. "Remember, if you kill me, you won't be able to get any other herbal medicine," Kevin said calmly. "Do you have more?" Gwen asked in disbelief. In her research, she discovered that pills like the one that Kevin had given her brother were very rare, and you had to be extremely lucky to find one. How could he possibly have more of them? "Not only do I have more, but I can get you as many as you want," Kevin said casually. "You—" Gwen was so shocked that she couldn't finish her sentence. Seeing the surprise on Gwen's face, Kevin didn't waste any more time talking to her. He grabbed a bowl from the table and looked at her confidently. He knew that the ingredients were fairly common. The key to preparing this kind of herbal medicine was the skill of the apothecary who was making it. After spending all that time with his mentor, the Night King, concocting a pill for Gwen Archer would be a piece of cake. "Be careful, that's a very valuable bowl," Gwen warned him. "Do you want the pill or don't you?" Kevin asked her. Kevin had been kidnapped by Gwen Archer and taken to her estate. She wanted him to give her a pill like the one he'd sold to her brother Dominic. Kevin broke his restraint, and after some struggling and heavy negotiating, he agreed to use his skills to make her a pill. Using common ingredients that were in Gwen's home, Kevin knew that he could concoct the correct herbal medicine for her. "This is going to take a while," Kevin said as he adjusted the temperature of the burner. It had to be just right. Before his training with the Night King, he needed nearly 2 hours to refine something like this, but now he could do it in less than half an hour. The moment the bowl shattered, a rich fragrance filled the entire room and 4 pills rolled onto the table. "You know how to concoct pills?" Gwen said in surprise as she looked at Kevin. "This is the first pill that I ever made. When I started, I didn't really know what it was, but you could call it the power pill." Kevin smiled as he picked up 3 of the pills and held them in his hand. "Give me one," Gwen said excitedly. Her eyes were filled with envy. She wanted to snatch all the pills from Kevin's palm. "Do you want it that badly?" Kevin said with a smile as he put the 3 pills into his mouth at the same time and started to chew. At his current level of development, a power pill wouldn't be much of use to him. Even if he ate them like candy, they wouldn't have much of an effect. "Why did you take them?" Gwen asked angrily as she stomped her feet like a little kid. However, she didn't dare to grab the 4th pill. She was afraid that Kevin would swallow that one too. "Even though I know how to prepare power pills, I can't give them away to others that easily." Kevin sneered as he picked up the last one and held it in his hand. "I'm sorry, Kevin. I shouldn't have sent someone to bring you here against your will. Please forgive me," Gwen begged him in desperation. "Please have pity on me and give me this last pill. I'll pay you whatever you want." "It's not about the money," Kevin explained. "The problem is that I really don't like getting hit on the head." "Then how about we even the score?" Gwen said as she picked up the knife that had fallen to the floor earlier and offered it to Kevin by the handle, with the blade pointing at her. "Forget it. You're too weak right now. I was afraid that I'd hurt you," Kevin replied as he casually tossed her the pill. Kevin knew very well that he was on Gwen's turf. The place was filled with guards who would give their lives for her. If he didn't give her the pill, he'd have a heck of a time getting out of there unharmed. It was one thing to fight one-on-one with somebody, but it was entirely different to deal with dozens of people at once. The best that he could hope for was to get out alive. Gwen swallowed the pill without any hesitation at all. This was just a start. She had bigger plans in mind. "Can I leave now?" Kevin asked coolly. Gwen didn't answer his question. Instead, she sat down on the sofa and gestured for him to take a seat too. "What are you doing?" Kevin asked curiously. He had no idea where this was going. Kevin, I want to ask you to teach me herbal medicine, Gwen said directly. You want to learn to be an apothecary? Kevin asked in surprise. When he got over the shock, he frowned and thought to himself, did she just say that she wants me to teach her? If she learned this skill, what could happen in the future? Yes, I sincerely want you to be my teacher, she quickly replied. But I'm not prepared to take on a student right now, and it would take a lot of effort. Just forget about it, Kevin explained. He had some misgivings and decided it was better to turn her down. I'm not afraid to make the effort. As long as I can learn how to concoct pills, you can ask me to do anything, Gwen pleaded as she leaned towards Kevin hopefully. Seeing her like this, Kevin was starting to have a hard time saying no. I'll follow whatever instructions you have and I'll offer you all my support in the future, she told him. Gwen had only one thought. If she could learn to be an apothecary, the sky would be the limit. Not only would she be able to improve herself by leaps and bounds, but she could move past any plateaus and get an advantage on all of her competition. After all, there were a lot of other rich and powerful people trying to do the same thing. Give me some time to think about it, Kevin said reluctantly. Really? So you're willing to think about it? Gwen asked excitedly. Don't get too excited. I just said I'd think about it, Kevin replied cautiously. That's okay. I'm sure you'll say yes, Gwen replied as she stood up from the couch with a big smile on her face. Can I leave now? Kevin asked grumpily. Of course you can, Professor, Gwen said very sincerely. Kevin looked at Gwen thoughtfully before walking out the door. The reason he said he'd consider her request instead of rejecting it outright was that he suddenly had an idea. If he could unite all the rich and powerful families in Chicago and build his own power base, he could turn the entire city into his personal territory, a kind of empire. Wouldn't that help him solve all his problems once and for all? This was about more than just herbal medicine. Not long after he left Gwen's estate, Kevin made his way back town. As he was walking toward his building, he suddenly ducked into an alley. Must have been hard for you to follow me all the way here, Kevin exclaimed as he leaned against the wall. However, when he finished speaking, nobody answered him and he couldn't see anyone following him. Why don't you just show yourself? Kevin said grouchily. Then he heard some movement and a shadowy figure suddenly stepped out from the darkness. The man looked ordinary, but Kevin sensed something very dangerous about him. Who are you? Kevin asked as his body tensed up. The Night King had told him this might happen. He should always be on the alert and not get careless. My wife has asked me to extend an invitation to you, the man said very frostily. The way he looked at Kevin was extremely cold, as if he had no feelings at all. It's getting late. Why don't we do this another day? Kevin replied bluntly. It's not up to you, the man said as he started to move toward Kevin. He took a step forward and reached for Kevin's neck. Sensing just how dangerous this man was, Kevin quickly retreated. He knew that his only chance of escape was to run out into the street. Kevin had actually felt that he was being followed from the moment he stepped out of Gwen Archer's mansion. That was why he walked into the alley. He wanted to lure the guy out of hiding, but he didn't expect him to be so strong. Although Kevin moved quickly, the man was even faster, and he appeared in front of him in the blink of an eye. There's no use resisting, the man sneered as he grabbed Kevin's collar. His grip was like iron, and no matter how hard Kevin tried, he couldn't budge him. Get lost, Kevin yelled as he threw a powerful punch. The man abruptly let go of Kevin's shirt and slid his palm along his wrist. Then he deftly redirected his punch toward the wall. Kevin's fist smashed into the bricks. When he pulled his arm back, he felt something sting him in the neck. In less than 3 seconds, Kevin closed his eyes and fell to the ground. I don't care how strong he's gotten. He obviously doesn't have enough combat experience, the man said as he lifted Kevin up from the ground and put him on his shoulder. He hurried to a long black sedan that was waiting nearby. When Kevin woke up, he was in a daze. As he tried to stand up, he found that he'd been tied up and left on the floor. What the hell is this? he thought to himself. Not again. Being tied up twice in one day made Kevin feel very upset. Where am I this time? Kevin wondered as he looked around the room, trying to find a clue to his location. Soon he spotted a sign in the hallway. Written in red and black letters, he saw the words, "The Alliance." I always wondered what the Alliance headquarters looked like, Kevin said to himself with a slight smirk. Ever since he'd met Marshall, Kevin had been finding out as much as he could about the Alliance. Their headquarters was in a wooded area not too far from Chicago. It was originally supposed to be a housing development, but for some unknown reason the construction had stopped midway and the Alliance ended up turning it into their center of operations. They were into a lot of activities, both criminal and legitimate, and this was a good arrangement for them. As far as anyone knew, it was just private land where nobody dared to trespass. Just then, the man who had tied Kevin up walked into the room. "You woke up pretty quickly from that knockout cocktail." Kevin frowned slightly when he heard this. He knew from his studies that this concoction didn't have any lethal properties, but it could render someone unconscious in under 10 seconds if they weren't strong enough. "Since you're awake, you should come with me to see my wife," the man said as he quickly undid all of the ropes that had been tied around Kevin's wrists and ankles. "Who are you? Why did you bring me here?" Kevin asked cautiously. "You'll find out soon enough," the man said as he led Kevin outside and headed for one of the other buildings in the woods. Kevin stretched his numb hands and feet before following him. He was glad to be freed from the ropes, but he knew that he wasn't free to leave. Since this was the Alliance headquarters, there would naturally be many experts around. He knew that he didn't yet have the skill to deal with them, so he was stuck here for now. Along the way, Kevin was stunned by the surrounding scenery. There were all kinds of exotic herbs and flowers growing on both sides of the road. Imagine the medicines I could make with all of this, Kevin thought to himself. He decided that he would pick some of these herbs before he left. It was worth the risk. About 10 minutes later, Kevin was stunned when they stepped into a clearing. No one would have thought that the Alliance would erect such a magnificent building in the middle of the woods. As he followed the man up the stairs and into the building, Kevin saw some very dangerous people. They gave him some really bad vibes. As he entered the main hall, Kevin saw a woman sitting in an enormous chair. It wasn't a throne, but it had the same feel. She was wearing a light purple dress with a very high collar that partially obscured her face. There were dozens of people standing in a semicircle around her. Kevin assumed that they were among the Alliance's elite, their very best members. While Kevin was looking at the woman, someone said firmly to him, "Well, what are you waiting for? Step up and meet the director." Kevin felt a hand push him forward until he was standing in front of her. "Good afternoon, Director," Kevin greeted her anxiously. He knew that in the Alliance, the executive director's wife often stood in for him and had a comparable rank. They were in the habit of using titles that made their organization sound more like a legitimate business. It was obviously a big deal for Kevin to be brought in for this meeting, but he was well aware that he had absolutely no rank in this room. "Are you Kevin Williams?" the director asked in a very powerful and dignified tone that you couldn't help but respect. "Yes, I am," Kevin replied as he nodded his head. "Do you know why I invited you here?" she asked him. "To tell you the truth, I have no idea," Kevin answered honestly. But inside he was thinking, invited? I was followed, drugged, and tied up. Kevin was also worried about something else. In his training, he'd learned a lot of the Alliance's secret recipes and techniques. It would be really bad for him if these people ever found out. "You don't have to be so reserved. I called you here to ask you something very important," the director said quietly. "Did you save a few women from the myriads recently?" Kevin was stunned when he heard this. Of course he remembered doing that, but he didn't know why the director of the Alliance would be interested in it. "Did you know who these women were? Why did you let them go for no reason?" she asked plainly. To tell you the truth, they were in real trouble. I let them go because I knew they were in the Sideros Alliance, which is connected to you, and I was concerned with their safety. Did something happen to them after they left? Kevin asked in confusion. No, they're fine. But you may not have known that they were candidates for promotion to the position of administrator in the Alliance. They're very important to us, the director explained. That's why I had you brought here. I'd like to reward you, she said pleasantly. Kevin's face lit up when he heard her say this. He knew that in the Alliance they had a director, several administrators, and 4 kings. The title of king was a holdover from the days before they tried to sound more businesslike. They used to be called kingpins. His mentor, the Night King, was one of them, but Kevin was probably the only one in the room who had ever seen his face. Strangely enough, the people in these positions rarely use their given names with anyone, just their titles. Kevin had never expected his act of kindness to the women to have had such important consequences. Kevin was unsure what would happen when he was led in front of the Alliance's director. He was relieved to find out that she wanted to reward him for saving the candidates for the position of administrator from the myriads the other day. Then the director said, I heard from Marshall that you've been very helpful to him in recent months. I've done my best, Kevin replied humbly. From what I've heard about your current skill level, you show great promise as an apothecary. So I've decided to give you the title of messenger in our alliance, the director said as she gestured for someone to bring something over to Kevin. One of her assistants handed him a platinum signet ring. Everyone in the hall had their eyes on Kevin. Most of them were filled with jealousy. The members of the alliance knew that the title of messenger was almost as important as the one of the kingpins. In addition to that, the messenger had the authority to mobilize resources and also carry out the director's will. But before Kevin could touch the ring, a man suddenly stood up. He respectfully acknowledged the director and then he said, Madam Director, I feel that Kevin is both immoral and incompetent. He isn't qualified to be messenger. Then he looked at Kevin with disdain. He was the Sergeant-at-Arms King, one of the Alliance's 4 kings. He had made countless contributions after joining the Alliance 30 years ago. Naturally, he had many supporters in the organization. I would like you to reconsider. The messenger's position is extremely important to us. We can't let a newcomer take on the role, he sneered. I think that although Kevin has made a great contribution, he is too young. I would only allow him to take this position once he's had more experience, he continued. Young people tend to be too impulsive. Besides, Kevin doesn't yet have a strong enough reputation to take on this responsibility. Nearly half of the people in the room agreed with him and pleaded with the director to rescind her order. Are you doubting my judgment? The director replied coldly. Please calm down, Madam Director. I wouldn't dare to insult you. But he can't be promoted to this position, he pleaded. Kevin saved our administrator candidates and has made great contributions to our alliance. And now that he has been trained as an apothecary, he's already qualified to be our new messenger. Besides that, his mentor is the Night King. Do you still think that he isn't qualified? The director explained. This last bit of information shocked the members. The Night King had been absent for years and they had no idea that he had taken on a pupil. It seems like the Alliance really has a lot of information about me. How did they find out about my training with the Night King? Kevin thought to himself as he listened to them whispering to each other. But he wasn't surprised that the director knew he could make herbal medicine. After all, he had saved Miranda in front of everyone at the campsite. Word was bound to spread. But how many of them believed in his skill? Do you have any objections now? The director asked the Sergeant-at-Arms King. Since Kevin is the Night King's pupil, I naturally have no objections, he answered fearfully. Then this matter will be decided, the director said as she stood up with her 2 assistants. Kevin, come with me. There is an important matter for you to attend to. Of course, Kevin said excitedly. He'd never thought that he would end up in such a prestigious position. As dozens of people watched, Kevin followed the director's assistants through a large door. It led to a room that was filled with a delicate fragrance. The director gestured for the two women to leave her alone with Kevin. "Since you're the Night King's pupil, you should have heard about the poison pill," the director said as she removed her collar so that Kevin could see her face clearly. When Kevin saw how beautiful she was, he was so stunned that he forgot to answer her question. "Do you realize that the Alliance would have you punished for looking at me like that?" she said sternly. "I'm sorry, but I was distracted for a second by your beauty," Kevin awkwardly apologized. "Since it's your first offense, I'll let it pass. For now, we have something more important to deal with. The poison pill," the director said lightly. "Anyone who joins the Alliance has to take one. If they don't take the antidote in time, they will not survive. Only the executive director and the Night King can prepare the antidote for the poison pill," she continued to explain. "But the executive director has been unavailable for the past 2 weeks, and the Night King has always been elusive. The people you just saw in the main hall will take the poison pill in less than 3 days. So it will be up to you to make the antidote," the director explained as she looked closely at Kevin. "So you want me to prepare a poison antidote?" Kevin asked with some doubt. "Well, it's not exactly an antidote," she clarified. "We use the poison pill to control the members and assure their loyalty to the Alliance. It's not easy to do this because of the pill's side effects. So what you need to do is to refine a medicinal pill that suppresses the toxicity of the poison pill, and not the actual antidote. Do you understand?" At this point, the director's eyes suddenly flashed with a touch of doubt, and she asked him, "Could it be that the Night King didn't teach you this?" "Of course my mentor taught me this, but I wonder if the proper medicinal herbs are stored in the headquarters?" Kevin asked with a faint smile. "That's easy. There are herbs and flowers everywhere on the property. In fact, there's an inexhaustible supply. You can go and pick them as you wish," the director replied. Then her expression suddenly turned serious. "But you can't mess this up. If you do, you'll pay with your life." "Rest assured, Madam Director, I won't let you down," Kevin replied happily. The reason he'd asked about the herbs earlier was to have the director's permission to go outside and properly pick the ingredients that he needed. "Go now," the director said as she gestured for Kevin to leave. "Come and find me when you're ready." Kevin left the room and headed outside. After about 2 hours, he had picked a lot of herbs and flowers that were growing all around the building. "I should bring Marshall back and show him all of this," Kevin said to himself excitedly. He had found all sorts of exotic ingredients. Some of them were necessary for the pills that he was about to prepare for the Alliance members, but others could be used for things that the Night King hadn't taught him yet and he knew that he wanted to make. Kevin found what he needed to reduce the effects of the poison pill. Then he headed over to the director's residence. As he walked in the door, he heard the sound of someone hyperventilating. "What's she doing?" Kevin wondered. He carefully walked to the door and knocked on it a few times. "Is that you, Kevin? Come in quickly," the director sounded a little anxious. When Kevin walked into the room, he froze on the spot. The director was curled up on her bed. Her long dress was soaked with sweat and her thighs were exposed a little. She was having trouble breathing. Kevin was immediately concerned and asked her, "Madam Director, have you taken the poison pill?" "I've been very busy lately, so I forgot that I took the poison pill a few days earlier than everyone else. Have you found any herbs that can counteract the poison?" she asked weakly. "I found them. Do you want me to make it for you immediately?" Kevin asked her. "You'll have to tie me up first. I'm afraid that the side effects will be too strong and I may hurt myself," she said while gritting her teeth. She felt as if there were tens of thousands of fire ants crawling over every part of her body. "I'll do what I can," Kevin said as he took a deep breath and closed the door. He found some scarves and tied the director to her chair. Next, Kevin found a bowl and began to prepare the antidote. 10 minutes later, the bowl shattered and a pill rolled onto the table. Kevin wiped the sweat from his forehead and picked it up carefully. He walked over to the director and gave her the pill. Then he stepped back and waited for it to take effect. After a half an hour, the director let out a long breath. The painful side effects had subsided, and she said, "I feel like I made a good choice. It looks like you have amazing skills for someone your age." "My mentor has taught me well, but I still have a lot to learn," Kevin said modestly. But then he wondered what else the Night King had left to teach him. "I'm not worried about refining the pill for the rest of the group right now. I have a different task for you," she said pleasantly. Kevin was a little worried. What could it be? Was she going to reward him for helping her? "What do you have in mind?" Kevin asked tentatively. "A month ago, we received news that some of our rival organizations plan to set up a school for the natural healing arts in Chicago. On the surface, it looks like a school to help nurture talented young people, but in reality, it's an attempt to squash our alliance." Her eyes flashed with anger as she said this. "This is a diabolical plan. How could they pretend to be virtuous but do something so vicious?" Kevin asked with righteous indignation. "Rest assured that as long as I'm still breathing, I won't let them succeed." "Well put. We need loyal and passionate men like you," she said with relief. "I was concerned that you wouldn't be willing to attend the school's new campus, but I'm not worried about that anymore." "What? You want me to be a spy?" Kevin was stunned once again. "I know that this is a difficult request, but it's the best time for you to make a contribution that would convince everyone that you're worthy of your new post as messenger," the director replied. "The new school will definitely cause a big stir in Chicago. Lots of rich kids will rush to enroll there. I need you to sneak in and find something for me." "What would you like me to find?" Kevin asked apprehensively. "One of the organizations involved in the school has a new process for herbal preparation that they call consolidation. I want you to learn it and bring it back to us," she told him. "But I'm sure you have people who already know far more about this," Kevin suggested. "Don't be afraid," she interrupted. "For you to complete the mission smoothly, I've prepared a secret manual for you. It's in the box on your left. Open it up and take a look." "Of course." Kevin agreed. He had his doubts, but it was too late to back down now. He opened the box and took out the manual. Kevin was surprised to see that there was also a blood-red pill in the box. "What pill is this?" Kevin wondered out loud. "This is called the condensation pill. It helps to keep your internal energy from being unstable, which can be very dangerous," the director explained. "The pill is there to help you with your mission." Kevin immediately became happy when he heard this. Of course, he had learned about the condensation pill. At this point in his development, it would be very important for him. Otherwise, he might have problems down the road. He might not be ready for it yet, but Kevin was willing to take a chance. Without even thinking, he swallowed the medicinal pill in one gulp. "Hold on," the director quickly stopped him. "The medicinal properties of this pill are extremely powerful. You are supposed to take it while soaking in a mountain spring." "Why didn't you say so earlier?" Kevin said in a panic. Why hadn't he read this in any of his books? There are no mountains near Chicago. "I was about to tell you, but you swallowed it before I had a chance," the director said helplessly. "What will happen if I take it like this? Can it kill me?" Kevin asked sadly. "I have no idea. I've never heard of anyone taking the pill this way." The director shook her head. "Come over here so I can take a look at you." Kevin nodded, but as he was walking over to the director, his face suddenly felt like it was on fire. Very soon, Kevin felt like he was in a furnace and his whole body was burning. But in the next second, he suddenly started shivering. The heat instantly turned cold, and even the air that came out of his mouth and nose was freezing. "This isn't the condensation pill," Kevin said as he fell to the ground trembling in agony. "This is the madness pill." Suddenly, Kevin felt his body fill with power that needed to be released immediately. After a few minutes, his vision was blurred. He got up shakily from the floor and started to take off his clothes. The Alliance director asked Kevin to go on an assignment to infiltrate the Chicago School for the Natural Healing Arts because it was really a front to destroy the Alliance. She gave him a condensation pill to help him with his mission. but it turned out to be a madness pill. While he was suffering from the effects of the pill, Kevin began to take off his clothes. "Kevin, what do you think you're doing?" the director said hesitantly. By now, under the effects of the pill, Kevin couldn't control himself. He reached out and pulled the director's thin skirt off. Feeling Kevin's hot breath, the director's entire body went soft, and her face became flushed. Although she had been married to the Alliance's executive director for many years, the two of them were husband and wife in name only. She was the only one who knew that her husband had suffered an injury several years before that had rendered him impotent. Since then, he had been obsessed with business and personal development, but he had no interest in women at all. As the director became lost in the moment, Kevin began kissing her lips. Lily, who had just finished her live broadcast, was lying on the bed when her phone vibrated. It was a message from one of her fans. "Are you busy? Do you have time to go out to eat tomorrow?" he asked. He was the second highest tipper in Lily's live broadcast, right after Mighty Moose. "How about after my show tomorrow afternoon? We can have dinner," Lily replied with a smile emoji. What she really wanted was to hear from Mighty Moose. But for some reason, every time he finished making his donation, he would immediately leave the chat. He never gave her a chance to communicate with him. "As long as you have the time, that's fine with me. How about the Salix Leaf Hotel tomorrow evening at 6? He suggested. "No problem," Lily replied simply. "Okay, see you tomorrow night," he answered. And then he added a bouquet of roses emoji. After a while, Kevin gradually came back to his senses. He couldn't remember anything about what had happened during the night. He only remembered feeling that there was an endless amount of energy in his body that needed to be released. Well, didn't kill me, Kevin thought delightedly. I didn't expect the madness pill to have such an overpowering effect on me. As he was thinking about the pill he had taken the night before, Kevin suddenly looked down and saw that his entire body was still trembling violently. At the same time, he saw the director lying completely naked in his arms. Her beautiful face was still glowing. He didn't know how long the director had been awake. When he looked at her face, she was staring at him seductively. He could see a mix of complicated emotions in her eyes. "Did I wake you up at all last night?" Kevin thought to himself in disbelief. The madness pill had been so strong that he was still feeling a little dizzy. They lay there in silence until the director finally said faintly, "When you wake up, you'll have to leave." "Madam Director, Kevin didn't know what to say for a moment. He hurriedly let go of her and got out of bed. The director stared intently at Kevin. In fact, she had mixed feelings in her heart. On the one hand, she was in charge of thousands of people, but on the other, this young man had given her something that had been missing from her life for so long. But what had happened during the night had made the director feel satisfied and blissful. In spite of her high rank in the Alliance, the director was still a very young woman. Her husband would barely look at her most of the time. While she was thinking about all of these things, the director slipped on a fiery red dress. She turned her head and looked at Kevin, who was standing nearby looking extremely vulnerable. Neither of them said anything, but the atmosphere in the room got very mysterious. The director broke the silence and told Kevin, "I understand what the pill did to you last night, so I'm willing to let it go. But you should be smart enough to know that this is just between the two of us." Then she added, "If you say a word about this, your entire family will regret that you were ever born." If word ever got out that the director had an affair with the Alliance's messenger, not only would Kevin's life be in danger, but it would also harm her reputation. She was afraid of how it would turn out for her. "Don't worry, Madam Director. Our secret will never leave this room," Kevin said very sincerely. He wasn't a fool. What good would it do him to tell anyone about this? What made Kevin feel really fortunate was that she hadn't rejected him. That would have killed him. "The mission I gave you is very important and quite simple. Bring back the secret of the consolidation pill. I'll arrange for someone to send you back to the city immediately," the director said. She couldn't help but think about the previous night as she looked at Kevin a little bashfully. "I won't let you down," Kevin answered devotedly. When Kevin returned to Chicago, it was already past 7 o'clock in the evening. As soon as he got back to his condo, he got a call from Miranda Steele. "Kevin, come down to downtown General right away. Someone just beat Dalton up." Miranda sobbed. "Don't panic. I'll be right there," Kevin told her. His good mood immediately changed to distress. Kevin arrived at the hospital within an hour. When he saw Dalton's condition, he almost went berserk. Dalton was in a coma, and his entire body was covered with blood-stained bandages. "The doctor said that his arms and legs were all broken, and even if he comes out of the coma, he may be bedridden for the rest of his life," Miranda told Kevin as tears flowed down her cheeks. "Who did this? I'll kill them," Kevin yelled as he clenched his fist tightly. "While we were eating at the Salix Leaf Hotel this evening, we saw Lily having dinner with a man," Miranda explained. "At first, Dalton and I thought that they were friends, but then we saw him secretly put something in Lily's glass while she was in the bathroom. Dalton tried to get Lily to leave with us, but she said that it was none of our business," Miranda added. "Then how did he get injured like this?" Kevin asked. When he heard that Lily was involved, he had trouble staying calm. What made Kevin even more confused was that Lily should have been home doing her live stream. What was she doing having dinner with another man at the Salix Leaf Hotel? "You know how Dalton is," Miranda replied. "He was trying to protect your wife, but when he insisted that she leave, she refused and even poured a glass of wine on him. Dalton couldn't hold in his temper anymore. He wanted to force Lily to leave, but the man immediately stood up to stop him. They got into a fight and Dalton asked me to call for help," Miranda continued. "But we didn't expect the guy to have so many powerful men with him. By the time I got back to the hotel, Dalton had been left in the street half dead," Miranda said as she wiped her tears. Now that he knew what had happened, Kevin got a determined look on his face and pulled out his phone to call Rachel. "Kevin, what's going on?" Rachel asked guiltily. "Do you know what happened at the hotel this evening?" Kevin asked her very calmly. Kevin was furious, but it was so deep inside him that it wasn't showing yet in his voice. I know, Rachel answered timidly. "Why didn't you call me right away? Did you forget what I told you?" Kevin asked her curtly. "No, I'm sorry, Kevin. I was just thinking about your safety. The man who was having dinner with Lily this evening was Nolan Hill from the Hill family in Detroit. I understand," Kevin replied as he hung up the phone before Rachel could finish what she was saying. "Have you heard of the Hill family in Detroit?" Kevin asked Miranda. "I've heard of them," she answered as she took a few deep breaths to try to control her emotions. "They got where they are with a lot of hard work, but they're also developing their physical strength. They have a passionate interest in herbal medicine and the martial arts." "Thanks, I understand," Kevin said as he started to call Lily on the phone. Kevin decided to call her because the whole thing had started as a result of her bad decision. "So, you're out of prison?" Lily asked him coldly. Kevin didn't feel like explaining what had happened with the Myriads and Officer Emmett, so he ignored her question and got straight to the point. "What happened at the hotel? Why didn't you listen to Dalton?" "Why should I listen to him? I was just eating with one of my fans. Dalton's the one who started the fight, and he only has himself to blame for getting beaten up," Lily said uneasily. She thought that Kevin had just gotten out of prison and was only calling to criticize her. She wondered if Kevin felt that Dalton was more important to him than she was. "Do you know that because of your gullibility, Dalton almost lost his life? He's still in a coma," Kevin said as he gritted his teeth. "Whether you were with that man or not, you must come to the hospital immediately." "Why should I pay attention to you? Listen, Kevin, we're finished. I have my own life now. Don't call me again." Lily hung up the phone after she finished speaking. Kevin was so angry that he almost crushed his phone in his hand. He turned around and started to head out of the hospital room. "Kevin, what are you going to do?" Miranda asked him. "Don't worry, Miranda. I'll get the guy who did this to Dalton," Kevin said gravely. Kevin felt that this was all his fault. If he and Dalton weren't so close, he wouldn't have tried to save Lily and he wouldn't be in the hospital right now. Kevin swore to take revenge for what the Hill family had done to his friend. While this was going on, Lily was in a luxurious private room at the Salix Leaf Hotel. She tossed her phone aside in frustration after she hung up with Kevin. Lily was already in a bad mood, but now that things were over with Kevin, she felt even worse. Nolan Hill was sitting beside her, dressed in a very expensive designer suit. He was chatting and laughing with another middle-aged man. Nolan was not only extremely wealthy, but he was also very handsome and had a good sense of humor. On top of that, he was very well educated. Some would call him perfect boyfriend material. Lily originally thought that she would be alone with Nolan this evening. She didn't expect to share him with this unattractive man, Dr. Spaulding. "I'm so lucky that Dr. Spaulding came to dinner this evening," Nolan said as he poured a glass of wine for his friend. The two of them had known each other for many years. Not long ago, Dr. Spaulding's family had developed a very powerful medicinal pill. That's why Nolan had invited him over to the hotel. Not only did he want to have a meal with his friend, but he also wanted to take the opportunity to ask him for a few of his pills. "How could I refuse an invitation from such a good friend?" Dr. Spaulding replied as he stared at Lily. After having a few more glasses of wine, Nolan decided to change the subject. "I heard that you may have access to a medicinal pill that could help me get past a sticking point in my training." "That's true," Dr. Spaulding replied. "But it took a lot of effort. We even had to find an apothecary to help us develop it." While he spoke, Dr. Spaulding swirled the wine in his glass. He never took his eyes off of Lily. "I wonder what I might have to do to get one," Nolan asked. He still hadn't picked up on Dr. Spaulding's intentions. "Seriously, Nolan? How could I let a few medicinal pills get in the way of our friendship?" The whole time Dr. Spaulding was talking, he was giving Lily a lewd smile. "It's just that I've been alone for quite a while. Would you be willing to let me spend some time with this beautiful creature?" Lily was very upset to hear him talking like this, and Nolan replied awkwardly, "You may not know this, but Lily is a good friend of mine, and she's very wholesome." Nolan wasn't ready to agree with Dr. Spaulding's request. He'd already spent a lot of time and money on Lily and didn't want to let her go before he'd had a chance to enjoy some benefits. "I won't press the matter, Nolan, but this medicinal pill..." Dr. Spaulding's voice trailed off, but Nolan knew what he was getting at. He'd been trying desperately for years to make some progress. How could he let this opportunity slip away? Nolan thought for a moment and then turned his head to look at Lily. "Would you kindly spend the night with Dr. Spaulding? I promise to make it worth your while." "What did you say?" Lily replied as she looked at Nolan in disbelief. "I'd like you to spend the night with Dr. Spaulding," Nolan said matter-of-factly. "I've spent a lot of money on you. How about if you return the favor?" Lily covered her face. She'd never expected Nolan to treat her like a prostitute. Dr. Spaulding held out a pill in his hand. As Nolan took it, he said, "Enjoy your evening." "Nolan, what kind of person are you? How could you do this to me?" Lily sobbed as she picked up her bag and headed towards the door. When Kevin called Lily, she told him that their relationship was over and that she'd moved on. She was in a room at the Salix Leaf Hotel with Nolan Hill and his friend Dr. Spaulding. Then Nolan shocked her by offering Lily to his friend in exchange for a powerful herbal pill. She refused and got up to leave. But a second later, Dr. Spaulding grabbed her from behind. "Let me go," Lily said as she struggled to turn around. Then she gave Dr. Spaulding a slap on the cheek. Surprisingly, this didn't make the man angry. In fact, he started to smile lasciviously. "I didn't expect you to have so much fire. It just so happens that I like women with passion. I find it exciting." "Let me go right now," Lily shouted as she shoved him away. Just then, the door burst open with a powerful kick. "Who the hell are you? How dare you interrupt us? Get out of here!" Nolan growled as he got up from his chair. Lily's face lit up when she saw who had charged into the room. She ran toward the door and yelled, "Kevin, please save me." "So you were the famous Kevin I've heard so much about." Nolan sneered as he slowly walked to the door. "Was Dalton Steele a friend of yours? I'm pleased to tell you that he's done for. He'll never cause anyone any problems for the rest of his miserable life." Dr. Spaulding was distracted by Kevin's explosive entrance and forgot about his sinister plans for Lily. Then Lily quickly ran behind Kevin and said weakly, "Kevin, Let's get out of here. You can't risk getting them angry." "And you're Nolan?" Kevin growled. "Now that you know who I am, why don't you get the hell out of here?" Nolan shouted as he looked at Kevin with disdain. "Not only will I not get the hell out of here, but I also have news for you. You'll never get out of Chicago safe and sound," Kevin said coldly. "Kevin, what are you talking about? This isn't a game. These guys are serious," Lily warned him. Lily thought that they still had a chance to escape, even though it was very unlikely. But if Kevin angered Nolan, they would definitely not be able to leave. She knew that Kevin was very good at fighting, but even Dalton had been badly beaten by Nolan and his men. She had no idea how Kevin would be able to stop all of them by himself. "You think you can stop me?" Nolan sneered. Then he snapped his fingers and a dozen bodyguards entered the suite from the adjoining room. The blood rushed from Lily's face when she saw them come in. These were the same men who had beaten Dalton within an inch of his life. "Is that all you've got?" Kevin said boldly. "That's all I need for a weakling like you. I'm going to teach you a lesson you'll never forget. You know what they say, might makes right. Well, today I'm right," Nolan said proudly. "That's what you think," Kevin said calmly. "That's right. That's what I think. If you're strong enough, you can try and stand up to me. But you're in for a big surprise," Nolan replied while staring daggers at Kevin. "Okay," Kevin said as he turned his head and shouted at his people in the hall. "Everyone, come in here." As soon as Kevin finished speaking, a dark wave of people rushed into the room. They were all members of the Myriads. "Capture all of them. Take them all and throw them into the lake," Kevin ordered brutally. Spencer and Derek, his senior aides in the Myriads, were the first to rush into the room. They were swinging wildly as they ran in and knocked 4 of Nolan's bodyguards to the ground at once. "Where are these men from?" Dr. Spaulding said in shock. In less than a minute, Nolan was lying on the floor, pressing his hand on the wound on his shoulder. It was so deep that his bones were showing through the skin. Half of his body was stained red with blood. His bodyguards had been beaten until they were half dead. The Myriads were busy picking them up and carrying them out of the hotel. Dr. Spaulding, on the other hand, was lying in a corner barely breathing. "Don't let this get out of hand. You've gotten the wrong idea. Lily and I are just good friends," Nolan stammered as he struggled to keep from passing out. "My brother is still lying in the hospital and hasn't come out of his coma yet. And you have the nerve to tell me not to let this get out of hand?" Kevin roared as he put his foot on Nolan's chest, almost breaking his sternum. "You said that might makes right. Well, it looks like I'm stronger than you and I have more men. Does that make you a weakling?" Kevin asked mockingly. "Yes," Nolan gritted his teeth and reluctantly answered. "You need to call the head of your family right now and ask them to apologize to Norman Steele personally," Kevin said sternly. "Yes, I'll do it." Nolan was in no position to argue. He was so badly beaten that he was afraid Kevin would kill him and have him thrown in the lake if he didn't do what he said. A couple of minutes later, Nolan called his grandfather and told him everything. "My grandfather wants to talk to you," Nolan said as he handed his phone to Kevin. His eyes were filled with resentment. For one thing, he'd never been stepped on by anyone before. Once he got back to Detroit, he swore to find a way to kill Kevin. When Kevin took the phone, before he could say anything, he heard a deep voice telling him, "Don't push this too far. You need to stop before this gets out of hand." Nolan's grandfather, Dale Hill, said carefully, "My grandson has already been punished. It's time for you to put a stop to this." "It's not that easy. Your grandson broke every bone in my brother's body. He may never walk again because of his injuries. Then your grandson had his friend attack my wife. And now you're telling me to stop?" Kevin said in disbelief. "Then what do you want from me?" Dale said as he took a deep breath. "You're going to call my friend's grandfather, Norman Steele, right now to apologize. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that your grandson will be allowed to leave Chicago alive," Kevin explained in a very threatening voice. "You certainly are an arrogant young man," Nolan's grandfather replied. "Why don't you come to Detroit one of these days when you have the time? I promise we'll prepare a proper welcome for you," Dale Hill said. It was clear to Kevin that this was a threat. "All right, I'm looking forward to it, if you're up to the challenge," Kevin retorted before he hung up the phone. "Can you please let me up now?" Nolan begged Kevin as his voice grew fainter and fainter. If he didn't get to the hospital soon, he would definitely lose too much blood. "I didn't say that I'd let you go so easily," Kevin said as he threw the phone against the wall and smashed it into pieces. "My grandfather told you that this has to end. If you don't stop now, he'll never let you get away with it," Nolan pleaded. "I'm not too worried about that," Kevin sneered as he pulled out the night dagger. "If I let you get away with what you did to Dalton, how can I ever look at myself in the mirror again?" Kevin growled as he sliced at Nolan's ankle with the blade of the knife that the Night King had given him. Then, as Nolan screamed in agony, Kevin cut his Achilles tendons. Even the members of the myriads who were watching this were scared out of their minds. They couldn't help but think that, although Kevin looked polite and peaceful on the outside, he could be quite vicious. Finally, Kevin turned to the men and said, "Take him outside and throw him into the lake." "Yes, sir," the men responded. They were looking at Kevin differently now. There was no need for Kevin to clean the blood off his dagger. It had been forged in a way that kept anything from adhering to it. After he left the room, Kevin headed to the Salix Leaf Hotel's underground garage. By now, Lily was already waiting for him there. He didn't even greet her as he walked to his car to drive away. "Kevin, listen to me. I know I was wrong. Please forgive me," Lily begged as she suddenly grabbed his arm. "What's the use of knowing you were wrong? Will that help Dalton heal from his injuries?" Kevin said as he pushed Lily away forcefully. "Kevin, please don't go. I admit I was wrong, but I couldn't help it. I was banished from the Jones family and had no choice but to find work. The online show was all I could find. If Nolan hadn't given me all that money, I never would have met with him," Lily sobbed. "How much did he pay you?" "I'll bet it wasn't even a tenth of what I gave you," Kevin replied expressionlessly. "How could you give me any money? Didn't you get locked up because you'd beat someone up? Didn't you just get out of jail today?" Lily asked in disbelief. Kevin took a deep breath and asked her, "Is one of your online fans called Mighty Moose?" Lily was stunned when she heard that. Could her top admirer have been Kevin? When she thought about this, Lily's body quivered. She opened her mouth to speak but didn't know what to say. Just as Kevin was about to open the car door, Lily grabbed his arm again. "I was wrong. I was really wrong. Please don't leave me." Kevin sighed. "We've been married for all these years, but you have no idea what I've been secretly doing for you. I ordered Williams Media to give you Brittany's account, and it was me who told Tyler Dawn to give you the Jones family's majority shares. I even bought you the Dream Lover necklace you wanted so much, but what have you done for me? Since you said that we're finished, let's leave it that way. Dalton is still lying in the hospital. I have to go and see him, but you should be thinking about one thing. He was put there because of you," Kevin said sourly. After he said this, Kevin pulled his arm away from Lily and quickly got into his car. He left without looking back. As she watched Kevin drive away, Lily couldn't hold back her tears. She didn't even remember how she got home that evening. Lily was up all night thinking about what Kevin had said. When Dalton Steele tried to warn her about Nolan, she didn't believe him at all. Then when Dalton was beaten up, she just stood there and watched in silence. She didn't say a word to help him. Early the next morning, a piece of explosive news shook all of Chicago. A young member of the Hill family had been critically injured. His arms and legs had been broken and he had been attacked with a knife. He would never be able to walk again, and his bodyguards had been beaten and thrown into Lake Michigan. Kevin didn't pay any attention to the news. His focus over the next few days was to help Dalton recover. During the day, he stayed by Dalton's bedside. At night, Kevin went back to his condo to read through his books to see if there were any pills that could cure his friend. 3 days later, Dalton's skin was starting to heal. Although his life had been saved, the doctor was sure that he would never be able to walk again for the rest of his life. "Do you want some more soup?" Miranda asked her husband as she dipped the spoon into the bowl. "I'm full," Dalton smiled and said. "Honey, do you think Kevin's the one who paralyzed Nolan?" I'm sure of it, she said. The police still don't know who did it, but the other night he told me that he would get revenge on your attacker. I watched him leave the hospital with my own eyes.
I never expected Kevin to be so ruthless. Who would have thought he had it in him to beat someone so savagely?
Dalton wondered out loud. Just as Miranda was about to reply, Kevin pushed open the door and walked into the room.
Kevin, did you just get out of a coal mine?
Dalton laughed when he saw his friend. Even Miranda, who was sitting next to the bed, couldn't keep from laughing. Kevin was filthy. Not only was his face covered with soot, but his clothes were torn and dirty. Even his hair was a complete mess. Don't worry about me right now. Hurry up and swallow this pill, Kevin insisted. Dalton didn't say a thing. He just opened his mouth and swallowed the pill.
Damn you, Kevin. What the heck did you just give me? That's the most bitter thing I've ever tasted,
Dalton complained. He thought he was going to throw up. I know it's bitter, but it will definitely help your recovery. Besides, this pill has a very nice name. It's called the Restoration Pill, and I went to a lot of effort to make it for you, Kevin told them as he watched for any negative reaction.
What kind of a thing is a restoration pill?
Dalton asked in confusion. Miranda also looked interested. I prepared this medicinal pill using some exotic herbs and also a few animal products. It was difficult because it was a little beyond my current level of training. I failed a dozen times last night before I finally succeeded, Kevin explained seriously.
You mean it's not a vegetarian recipe?
Dalton joked. He asked Miranda to pour him a glass of water as fast as she could. He hated things that tasted bitter. You can't drink any water right now. You have to absorb the medicinal properties of the pill first, Kevin told them as he quickly stopped Miranda from handing him the glass.
Are you deliberately messing with me, brother? Dalton groaned.
Kevin, you have no idea. I've never met anyone who hated bitter herbs as much as Dalton, Miranda told him. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This was the first time she'd felt hopeful in days. After Kevin defeated Nolan Hill and his men, he spent his days visiting Dalton at the hospital. He worked tirelessly throughout each night trying to make a restoration pill to help him heal from his injuries. The pill was incredibly bitter, but Dalton couldn't drink any water until the medicine had been absorbed into his body. That's fine. He'll be able to eat soon, Kevin said to Miranda with a smile. According to his research, the biggest effect of the restoration pill was to reconnect bones and tendons. The growth in his connective tissue would be generated starting at the DNA level. It was ideal for Dalton's current condition. After a few minutes, Dalton's expression suddenly became strange, and then he sat up in his bed. Dalton, you're... Miranda covered her mouth in surprise and looked at her husband in disbelief. The doctor had assured Miranda that her husband's tendons couldn't be connected again, even with surgery. So Miranda had been sitting by her husband's bedside for the past few days praying for a miracle. When Kevin gave him the restoration pill, she finally had some hope.
Honey, my hands and feet are tingling. I think it's working, Dalton said as he started to move them ever so slightly. Will I really be healed? Dalton asked in disbelief as he looked at his friend. Kevin, this pill you gave me is like magic. I think it's going to work.
You were injured because of me. Did you think I wouldn't move heaven and earth to help you? Kevin reassured him.
There's no need for brothers to thank each other, but you know how grateful I am, Dalton said very sincerely.
Miranda looked at her husband and was afraid that it would all turn out to be a dream. She couldn't stop crying. With all she knew about Dalton's condition, this couldn't possibly be real. Even the best medical specialist didn't know how to help him. How could he be recovering simply because of Kevin's medicinal pill?
Kevin, we should go celebrate, Dalton said excitedly.
First, you need to recover a little bit more. It'll take some time for you to get back full use of your arms and legs, Kevin explained. But I guarantee that your physical therapy will go by pretty quickly. Miranda agreed. Yes, we should schedule that right away. But first, we should go visit your grandfather. He's been so worried about you for the past few days that he hasn't been able to eat or drink.
Okay. Let's go to Grandpa's and toast Kevin, Dalton said excitedly.
Kevin and Miranda looked at each other when they heard him say this. They both shook their heads helplessly. By 6 o'clock in the evening, they'd arrived at the Steele family's mansion. Norman Steele sat at the head of the table. Dalton was temporarily in a wheelchair until he could walk without assistance. Kevin sat next to him, and Dalton's cousins were also at the table. One of them was Rain Steele and the other was Blanca. They had decided to hurry back to the mansion to see Dalton once they'd heard that he was out of the hospital. They were both dressed in beautiful outfits, but when they saw Kevin, they didn't seem very happy. For one thing, Rain and Blanca both knew that their cousin had been injured because of Kevin. They took an instant dislike to him and didn't like the way he was dressed either. They didn't understand how their cousin had become such good friends with someone like this. But Kevin, who was used to being looked down upon by others, didn't care at all. He just kept drinking and chatting with Dalton and his grandfather. "I'm sure you'll be completely recovered soon, my boy," Norman said with a smile. "And your timing couldn't be better. It just so happens that the Chicago School for the Natural Healing Arts will open in just a few days. I want you to go there with your cousins." Norman had always had high expectations for Dalton, and he sincerely believed in his grandson's talent. As long as he got into the healing arts school, he would definitely surpass his peers, and in the future, he would be able to lead the Steele family to great success. On top of that, if Dalton got recognition by the school's directors, then the entire Steele family would benefit from it.
"Grandpa, if I go there, what will happen to the family business?" Dalton asked worriedly.
He knew that his grandfather had been retired for many years. It would be impossible for Dalton to handle the family's business and go to school at the same time. "Don't worry about it. Miranda can take care of that. She still has some things to learn, but I can help her keep up with that," Norman said casually. Dalton nodded his head in agreement. His grandfather was very highly respected in Chicago, and as long as he was around for guidance, they would be okay.
"Kevin, do you want to join me?" Dalton suddenly asked.
"Are you kidding? I wouldn't miss it for the world," Kevin said with a smile. Not only did he plan to enter the School for Healing Arts, but he was also going to steal something from them for the Alliance. Just then, Rain blurted out, "Well, not everyone can qualify to get in. Do you have any connections?"
"What are you talking about?"
Dalton replied unhappily. He couldn't bear to see anyone looking down on Kevin, even if it was his cousin. "Dalton, why are you helping outsiders?" Rain pouted as she looked at Miranda and asked her, "Are you going to let him bully me?" "I'm not worried about that. Your cousin and Kevin have been very good friends for a long time," Miranda responded helplessly. "I don't care about that. Just look at how tattered his clothes are. Even if he got into the school, he'd only be considered an ordinary student. I'll bet they'd drop him in less than a year," Rain declared. Just yesterday, the School for the Healing Arts had announced its list of rules. 2 of them were to be followed very strictly. Just yesterday, the School for the Healing Arts had announced its list of rules. 2 of them were to be followed very strictly. The first was that applicants had to belong to a prestigious Chicago family. Moreover, each family could only present 3 applicants. This wasn't to discriminate against the poor. It was because the process of development through herbal medicine was very expensive. The ingredients and equipment alone were extremely costly, and ordinary people simply couldn't afford them. The second rule was that the school was a 4-year program of intensive study. Every year there would be a final exam which consisted of various projects. Some of the final projects were to be done in groups, and others were based on individual work. If someone didn't complete the final exam and do well on it, they would be dismissed from the program.
"You can get in, can't you, Kevin?" Dalton asked worriedly.
"No problem, my friend. I promise I'll be there with you," Kevin said confidently. He just needed to ask Miss Wilson to use Williams Media to give him a name, so that wouldn't be an issue. As for Rain's mockery, he didn't take it to heart at all.
"All right, I'll see you there,"
Dalton said as he slowly raised his wine glass and clinked it with Kevin's. He still had some difficulty with his movements, but he was feeling a lot better. "By the way, Dalton, I have something for you," Kevin announced as he reached into his pocket and pulled out an herbal pill. Norman Steele was shocked and asked him, "Kevin, have you been training as an apothecary?" Kevin didn't realize that Dalton's grandfather would be so perceptive. He was still trying to keep his training with the Night King a secret. I just dabble in it, Kevin said modestly. Everyone at the table gasped when they heard this, especially Norman, who was very impressed. He knew that being an apothecary was an extremely difficult thing. Not only did it require talent, but it also demanded a large amount of money, especially if you were trying to develop your own power at the same time. But the effort could also bring unexpected benefits. It wasn't just your own strength that you could develop. The most important thing was the effect on someone's lifespan from the changes that the herbal concoctions brought about, beyond the cellular level and even down to DNA repair. With constant maintenance, there was no telling how long someone could live. Norman couldn't believe that Kevin had reached this kind of level at such an early age. He wondered what he might be able to achieve in the future. It seems like Dalton has really made a good friend. If our family can align with him and get his protection, we'll definitely thrive, Norman thought to himself.
Not bad, Kevin. I had no idea you'd made such progress. Why didn't you tell me? Dalton exclaimed after recovering from his shock.
Well, you never asked me before, Kevin said nonchalantly. Dalton's cousin Rain was so embarrassed that she wished she could run out of the room. She'd been trying for years to improve her mind and body with training in herbal remedies, but she knew that she would never be able to reach Kevin's level, even if she kept at it for the rest of her life. She realized that she shouldn't have been ridiculing him. Just as Norman was about to raise his glass, Kevin suddenly patted Dalton on the shoulder. "Dalton, take this pill," Kevin said as he handed him the power pill that he just pulled out of his pocket.
It's not another restoration pill, is it? I still haven't gotten the taste out of my mouth, Dalton asked him cautiously.
Before Kevin could respond, Blanca interrupted him. "Don't take it, Dalton. He may be an apothecary, but just look at how he's dressed. He can't possibly have any skill." As soon as she finished speaking, her grandfather scolded her. "Shut up, Blanca. You have no idea what you're talking about." Norman had had a lot of life experience and saw qualities in Kevin that his granddaughter didn't. He could tell that Kevin was the kind of person who just didn't care about wealth. Otherwise, Kevin would have used his abilities to worm his way into a lot of rich families just for the money. "This might be a great opportunity for us," Norman thought as he looked at Kevin.
"So, Kevin, what the hell is this thing?" Dalton asked.
"If you don't want to take it, that's okay. I'm sure I could sell it for a few bucks," Kevin said as he reached out to take back the power pill. "Hold on. I wonder if you wouldn't mind letting me take a look at it," Norman asked as he looked at the pill excitedly. "Be my guest," Kevin said very respectfully. He took the power pill and put it in Norman's hand. After looking at it carefully for a few minutes, Norman suddenly got very enthusiastic. His grandchildren could see that his hand was starting to tremble a little. They were surprised to see this sort of behavior from their grandfather. He was usually very calm and composed. "Kevin, is this really a power pill?" Norman stammered. "I thought you might know what it is," Kevin complimented him. "You really think that's a power pill?" Blanca asked in astonishment. "I'm sure of it," Norman said excitedly. He could barely contain himself. Everyone who was interested in using medicinal herbs for self-improvement knew one thing. For some unknown reason, many years ago the apothecaries had gradually disappeared. Because of this, vast amounts of knowledge and many miraculous pills had been lost for all time. Among them was the most famous one, the power pill. An herbal med like this could help someone to make great strides in their development. But the current pills weren't exactly like the ones that had been lost with the disappearance of the apothecaries. They were all created by imitating what little was known about the original power pill. Consequently, the medicinal properties of the pills could vary greatly. Otherwise, the pill that the old gentleman had bought at the Pearl family auction could have gotten even more money. After taking a deep breath, Norman calmed down a bit and turned to Kevin, saying, "I can never thank you enough for your kindness to our family." "You're too generous, sir. Since I consider Dalton to be like a brother to me, I naturally should share everything with him, both the good and the bad. A simple power pill is no big deal," Kevin replied casually. By now, making a power pill was a piece of cake for Kevin. He'd have made more of them, but he didn't have as much free time lately. "Dalton sure is lucky to have a brother like you," Norman commented as he handed the pill to his grandson. "Take it right away. Don't disappoint your friend."
No, I think you should take the pill, Grandpa. You haven't made any progress in years. This will definitely help you more than me, especially with all the extra work you'll have while I'm at school, Dalton offered. Besides, I'll be at the Healing Art School soon. I'll definitely come across a lot of pills once I'm there. Please, take it, Grandpa. Dalton continued to persuade him. After all, you're the key to keeping our family on top. We need you to be at your best when dealing with our competitors.
But Dalton wasn't just worried about that. He knew that his grandfather was getting older and the power pill could help him regain some of his health so that he could be around for many more years to come. Norman pretended to be angry and retorted, "Are you trying to disobey your grandfather?" Of course he wanted to try the power pill. With all that it could do, who wouldn't want it? But Norman still hesitated. Even though he could really use the boost, Dalton was the future of the Steele family, and he needed to develop himself even more, especially while recovering from his injuries. So he finally decided to give the pill to his grandson.
I'm not trying to be rude, Grandpa. I'm just thinking about your health. Go ahead. You should take it,
Dalton insisted as he shook his head. As he watched the grandfather and grandson passing the pill back and forth, Kevin smiled happily and said to them, "I think there's only one solution for your problem." The room fell silent as they all looked at him, wondering what he would do. Kevin reached into the pocket of his jacket, pulled out another power pill, and held out his hand to Dalton and Norman. Kevin offered Dalton a power pill, but his friend thought that his grandfather needed it more. They kept passing it back and forth, each insisting that the other take it. Finally, Kevin decided that it would be better if both of them took the pill, so he reached into his pocket and pulled out another one. "This should settle your argument," Kevin informed them as he handed a second power pill to Dalton. Dalton and his grandfather didn't have to be told twice. They each took their power pill and swallowed it right away. Kevin told them to sit for a while and let the pill take effect. Some people even meditate so they can relax during the process. Kevin sat back in his chair and slowly sipped the wine. He and Miranda chatted a little to pass the time. Suddenly, Rain and Blanca stood up and walked around the table to Kevin. "I'm sorry, Kevin. Blanca and I were wrong about you. I hope you won't hold it against us." Rain apologized sincerely. "You don't need to apologize. Didn't bother me," Kevin replied as he put his wine glass on the table. He knew exactly why they were suddenly being so nice to him. "Unfortunately, I don't have another one on me. When I have the time, I'll make a pill for each of you," Kevin replied to them. But actually, he didn't want to give either of them a power pill. Kevin had moved beyond the point where a power pill could help him, but it still wasn't something that should be given away without considering what someone may do with it. When he heard Dalton's cousins insulting him earlier, it didn't bother him, but he thought they might misuse their power to take revenge on someone for a tiny offense. "Thank you, Kevin." Rain and Blanca thanked him profusely. They had no idea that Kevin had no intention of giving them one of his pills. However, Miranda saw right through and understood what Kevin was thinking, but she didn't say anything. She just sat there quietly sipping her coffee. After Dalton's cousins and his wife left, his grandfather finally came back into the room. Norman talked with Kevin for a few minutes and then went up to his bedroom. That left Kevin alone in the living room with Dalton. Norman was fine with his grandson hanging around with Kevin. If the Steele family could be connected with such a powerful person, it could definitely help them in the future. When it was almost 11 o'clock, Dalton finally felt better and woke up from his relaxation. "Not bad, Dalton. You look better already. How do you feel?" Kevin asked him.
"I never thought that a power pill could have such an immediate effect,"
Dalton confided as he started to open and close his hand. Even though he still hadn't completely recovered from his injuries, he could tell that his body was much stronger than before. With a solemn expression on his face, he exclaimed,
"I can see why people are willing to pay so much for this."
Just remember that the power pill works best when someone is at a lower level in their training. For example, if I took one now, I wouldn't feel it at all, Kevin explained. The reason why you feel so much better isn't only because of medicinal pills, it's also because you've been doing so much over the years and you are ready for it.
"Let's change the subject. Have another glass of wine with me," Dalton suggested as he raised his wine glass to toast Kevin.
"Okay, my friend," Kevin answered him, "but just a little. You're still regaining your strength." The two of them talked for a few hours before they finally fell asleep. When Kevin woke up the next day, he saw that Dalton was still on the couch, sleeping like a log. Kevin went downstairs and had a light breakfast with Norman, and then he left for Williams Media. "Has anything unusual happened in the company lately?" Kevin asked Miss Wilson as he pored over the materials that she'd prepared for him. "Everything's going well. Ever since you took care of the problem with Vito Booker, Brittany and Charity were offered a lot of advertising contracts. Now they're our top 2 clients in the city," she reported cheerfully. "That's great news," Kevin responded. After a moment, he added, "I wonder if you could help me with something. Could you have a few large bowls delivered to my office?" "Yes, sir," Miss Wilson replied as she left the room. Then Kevin called Mitchell Cook and his other friends to ask them to come to his office right away. They hadn't seen each other since they'd gotten back from the Williams family mansion. But his main reason for inviting them was that he wanted to take control of as much of Chicago as he could. Cook and the others would be a huge help to him in the future, so he needed to get them on board with his plan. An hour later, with some ingredients he'd brought along with him and using the bowls Miss Wilson had found for him, Kevin had prepared 9 pills. He finished just before his friends walked in. "We hurried over as soon as you called. Is there something important that you need to tell us?" Adriana inquired. "Please have a seat first," Kevin replied as he gestured for them to sit down on the sofa along the wall. Then he smiled as he took the pills in his hand. "Have you all recovered from your injuries yet?" Kevin asked them as his eyes swept across their faces. "I've been busy ever since I got back, so I never had a chance to visit with you guys."
"Oh, we got over that a long time ago," Cook replied casually.
Kevin decided to get right to the point. "I called you guys over here to find out if you were interested in joining me on a path of personal growth that can lead to much greater things." Cook and the others looked at each other when they heard him say this. Finally, Emo Squire answered, "I think you already know we'll stand with you no matter what, but why are you suddenly asking us now?" "I'm glad to hear that," Kevin replied very emotionally. "I have something for you. Do you know what these are?" Kevin opened his hand to show them the pills that he'd just manufactured. "Are those power pills?" Gilbert asked him curiously. "That's right, Gilbert," Kevin admitted openly. "But I only have one request. You must never give them to others, and you can't tell anyone that I gave them to you." They all stood up from the sofa, fascinated by the pills that they saw in Kevin's hand. They were all very excited because of the rumors about what had happened at the Pearl family auction house a while ago. Just one of these herbal pills was worth a fortune. "Each of you can have 2 of them," Kevin announced. Then he placed one in Cook's hand and let them divide the rest. After they had each taken a power pill, they sat back down in the comfortable sofa to let the medicine take effect. For the next hour, Kevin laid out his plan in detail. Cook and the others were chomping at the bit to get started. When it was a little past 5 o'clock, the group left the office. But now, with Kevin's help, they had all become even more powerful than they were before. Kevin stood at his office window and looked out at the streets below, thinking to himself, "We've finally taken the first step in taking back this city." The next day went by very quickly. With great fanfare and with all of the city's most important political figures in attendance, the Chicago School for the Natural Healing Arts officially opened its doors. More than 1,000 people had already gathered on the campus. The new students were all checking each other out, trying to figure out who would be the most popular. Some of them were wondering what the ratio of male to female students was. The serious students were simply excited to get started on their training. Suddenly, there was a lot of commotion in the crowd. A bright red Ferrari SP3 pulled up. This got everyone talking. Some of them knew that the car cost at least $2 million and could reach 60 miles per hour in less than 3 seconds. They were all wondering who would step out. Sherwin Blair and Officer Emmett got out of the car with big smiles on their faces. Blair blew a kiss to a group of young women, which got him a lot of looks, including a disappointed frown from his fiancée, Officer Emmett. He enjoyed being the center of attention, so he'd bought the car just the evening before. Blair was putting on quite a show. But before he had a chance to revel in all the attention, someone else caused an even bigger stir in the crowd. Under the escort of 2 Bentley Flying Spurs, a vintage Aston Martin DB5 screeched to a stop in front of the main building. A handsome man got out of the car and attracted way more attention than Blair had. Just about everyone knew that it was Wade Bennett. He was a famous race car driver, and the 3 cars that had just pulled up were worth more than some people earn in a lifetime if they're lucky. While everyone was admiring his fancy rides, a string of black Mercedes sedans started pouring onto the campus. Fortunately, the school had decided to open in the suburbs instead of downtown, or the traffic congestion would have been a nightmare, even by Chicago standards. Soon, a large group of bodyguards wearing black suits stepped out of the cars and started to gesture to the crowd to clear a path. Everyone was wondering who was about to arrive. After all, the students were all from rich families, but this was on another level. While they were all trying to guess who it would be, a bright green Lamborghini Countach rumbled to a stop at the space that the bodyguards had opened up. A few of them quickly walked over and opened the door, and a beautiful woman in a fiery red dress stepped out gracefully. The students couldn't believe they'd be going to the same school as Penny Sutherland. She was from the richest family in the Midwest. The Sutherland family had businesses and factories in every city for hundreds of miles. They also had quite an impressive history in both business and politics. This wasn't surprising because they'd been working on their personal development for years. It made sense for them to send one of their children to the school so they could keep their competitive edge. Suddenly, everyone heard a loud noise in the sky. They all turned and looked up to see 3 private helicopters flying in formation. They landed right in the middle of the soccer field, and when they shut off their engines, a group of new students stepped out. It was an impressive sight. Then a distinguished-looking middle-aged man stepped up to the podium that had been placed on the steps of the main building. He tapped the microphone and spoke to the new class.
First of all, I'm very happy that you've all chosen to begin your studies at our fine school. Please keep in mind that we have strict rules on behavior, and if they aren't followed to the letter, you risk expulsion.
After he finished speaking, some school officials went up to the students who had arrived by helicopter and escorted them off the campus. Next, the students were divided into 4 groups that split up to the north, south, east, and west. They had all received text informing them of their group assignments and a link to their schedule. As they were all filing into the buildings for their orientation classes, Kevin pulled up and parked in a visitor spot.
Kevin, you're the slowest driver I've ever seen. How can you get someplace late in a Pagani Roadster?
Dalton teased Kevin. Why don't you drive next time? Anyway, it was your idea to take the Dan Ryan Expressway, Kevin snapped back. Of course they'd been stuck in a traffic jam on the way there. A ride that should have taken a little over half an hour dragged on for almost 2 hours. The school had been granted a piece of land in the suburbs many years before, but it had taken a long time for the construction to be completed. That's a lot of people, Kevin commented as he looked at the enormous crowd filing into the buildings. He was tempted to turn around and leave.
Damn it, look at them all. I think they've already divided everyone up into classes. Come on, Kevin, let's go take a look,
Dalton said as he patted his buddy on the shoulder. Just look at them all squeezing in there. Why don't we wait until they're all gone before we go and take a look? Kevin had no intention of going in right now. Then he added, anyway, the first day is just going to be orientation. Classes don't officially start until tomorrow.
Come on, let's join them, Dalton said as he slowly got out of the car.
His tendons had already healed enough so that he was able to get by with just a cane. He took Kevin by the elbow and headed towards the crowd. When they got closer, they checked their smartphones and found out which way they needed to go first. After standing in line for a long time, Kevin and Dalton finally got to see the inside of a classroom.
Hey, Kevin, it looks like we're in the same classes, Dalton said happily as he slapped him on the back.
It's going to be a lot of work. Let's see how excited you are by the end of the semester, Kevin said calmly. What Kevin didn't tell his friend that he was picking up on a lot of very strong vibes, and it really had him concerned. When Kevin and Dalton arrived on campus for orientation at the Chicago School of the Healing Arts, they were a little late. They hurried over to their assigned building to join the rest of their orientation group. Thanks to Kevin's restoration pill, Dalton was recovering well, but he was still a little unsteady on his feet. As Kevin looked around at all the staff members, he wondered, How the hell am I supposed to steal that formula when there are so many powerful people here? Could the director be deliberately setting me up? Just then, a familiar voice drew his attention away from his distressing thoughts. It was Lily walking up to him and calling his name excitedly. "I knew you'd be here," Lily exclaimed as she took Kevin by the arm and whispered in his ear. "Kevin, please don't be angry with me. I know I messed up, but I promise I'll never do anything like that again." Kevin didn't answer her. He just gave her a cold stare.
"Hi, Lily. I didn't expect you to be here, too. What a happy coincidence," Dalton remarked as he gave her a big smile.
"Dalton Steele? Are you feeling better now?" Lily asked him in shock. The last time she'd laid eyes on Dalton was after Nolan and his men had beaten him up. She'd never expected that he would recover so quickly.
"I'm doing a lot better. With the help of the pill Kevin gave me, I'm almost fully recovered," Dalton replied as he flexed his arms. Not only did the restoration pill cure his injuries to his arms and legs, it also helped heal all his scars. "I'm so sorry, Dalton. If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have ended up in the hospital." Lily lowered her head and said guiltily. "That's okay. No harm done. Look, I'm back on my feet again," Dalton explained to her. "Besides, how could I let my best friend's wife be bullied and not step in, even if it means risking my life?"
Lily smiled faintly when she heard him say that, but it upset her to no end to see that Kevin was still ignoring her. Lily had been thinking about a lot of things over the past few days. First of all, how did Kevin suddenly know so many important and powerful people? And how was he able to bring in so many men to help him fight Nolan's bodyguards at the hotel the other day? Plus, she still didn't know why Kevin had been arrested by the police. None of it made any sense to her at all. "Please don't be upset with me, Kevin. How can I convince you that I won't make a mistake like this ever again?" Lily pleaded awkwardly. Kevin pulled his arm away from her. He was really getting angry now. Ever since his family had rejected him a few years ago, Kevin hadn't had any real friends. Everyone thought that he was just a freeloader living off the Jones family's money, and they all looked down on him. Kevin was starting to think that friendship was bullcrap, but ever since he met Dalton, he knew the true meaning of the word brother. However, because of Lily, he'd almost lost his brother, so Kevin really didn't know how to let go of it and move on. Dalton could see that Kevin wasn't happy, so he tactfully stepped aside to give the two of them some privacy. Suddenly, they heard someone nearby mocking Kevin loudly. "Say, isn't that the bum who's been mooching off the Jones family?" Sherwin Blair walked up, holding hands with Officer Emmett. He said to Kevin disdainfully, "Of course. Now you can't sponge off them anymore, can you? Even your wife has been kicked out of the family. How will you ever survive?" "That's enough, Sherwin. I told you not to start any trouble with Kevin." Officer Emmett snapped at him. As a member of the Chicago Police Department, she naturally couldn't attend the school, but she happened to have the day off, so she decided to visit the campus with her fiancé. "I can't believe you're still standing up for this trash, Kelly." "Anyway, I'm only telling the truth," Blair said loudly. "This guy is a complete waste of space. I really don't know how he was ever accepted here." Sherwin's insulting comments attracted the attention of the people around them. By now, a lot of them had already recognized Kevin. After all, he could be considered a kind of celebrity among the Chicago elite because of his reputation in the Jones family over the past few years. They all started to whisper to each other. Some of them were wondering how someone like him could have gotten into the elite program. Others thought it would be embarrassing to be in the same class as Kevin. What they couldn't figure out was how he had become such good friends with Dalton Steele. Kevin could hear what they were saying, and it ticked him off a little. But he managed to keep his composure and simply replied, "Well, I'm here to go to school. Do you have a problem with that? Kick me out if you think you can do it. Otherwise, just shut your face." "You're so low class. What makes you think you can talk to me like that?" Blair snarled at him. "What's wrong? I know you didn't think much of me, but now we're in the same class, so I guess that means you're low class too," Kevin said with a sneer. "I didn't know you could express yourself so well. But if you think you and I are equals in any way, then—" Blair was about to finish what he was saying when Dalton interrupted him.
"Are you done yet?"
Dalton barked as he gave him a hard slap on the face. The onlookers were shocked to see their argument turn physical. Blair didn't dare to take Dalton on head-to-head. He stammered, But Dalton, I wasn't talking to you. I was talking about that scum Kevin.
Don't you know that Kevin is my brother? Dalton bellowed as he shoved Blair in the chest, knocking him to the ground.
The students who were standing around them didn't say a word. After all, Dalton had a nasty reputation and they didn't want to get on his bad side. Seeing that Dalton was about to hit Blair again, Kevin stopped him and reminded him, "Let's not get carried away, Dalton. It's beneath our dignity to fight with someone like this. Let's just teach him a little lesson." Just as Blair was getting up again, Kevin gave him a swift kick in the butt, which sent him rolling over and over on the floor. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blair. I don't know why my leg keeps cramping up lately," Kevin taunted him. "You're playing with fire," Blair growled as he gritted his teeth and glared at Kevin.
"What are you gonna do? Run home and tell your mommy?"
Dalton jeered as he stared him down. Officer Emmett couldn't take any more of this. She stepped forward and put Blair behind her. Then she warned, "Kevin and Dalton, that's enough. Is that how you behave in a place like this?" Very few people knew that Officer Emmett and Dalton were actually mortal enemies. As far as she was concerned, Dalton was evil incarnate. He'd caused a lot of trouble in Chicago over the years. Since Officer Emmett was part of the crime task force, she dealt with Dalton far more than she wanted. However, Dalton was too smart and he never let Officer Emmett catch him in the act. She was always a step behind him. "Officer Emmett, as a police officer, you shouldn't be biased just because Sherwin's your fiancé. You just saw what happened with your own eyes. Tell me, who was it that went too far?" Kevin retorted unhappily. Kevin knew that Officer Emmett owed him a favor for what he had done to help her infiltrate the Myriads. And he'd assisted her in other ways too, so she knew what kind of man he was.
"All right, for Kevin's sake, I won't argue with you right now. If you stay out of my way, I'll stay out of yours,"
Dalton conceded, but he still gave her a dirty look. Blair covered his face with his hand and struggled to come back to his senses. Dalton's slap had almost knocked him out. Just as Officer Emmett was about to say something else, Kevin had already walked away with Dalton. The school's alert system had just sent out a text to let all the students know that they had to be in their assigned classrooms within 5 minutes. On the way to class, Kevin stopped in the men's room, so he was a minute or so behind Dalton. When he entered the class, Dalton stood up and waved at him to take a seat next to him. "Why are we sitting in the last row?" Kevin asked with a slight frown.
"This school's main purpose isn't really book learning. What's more important is talent and seizing opportunities, so there's no point in sitting in the front row," Dalton answered as he put his foot up on the seat in front of him. Just then there was a murmur as the students saw a very striking young woman walk into the room. As they all watched in fascination, Penny Sutherland sat down in the back row. "Geez, Dalton, now I know why you sat way back here," Kevin ribbed his friend as he stared at Penny, who had found a spot just a few seats away from them. "I have my moments," Dalton answered with a broad smile.
Dalton was usually careless, but sometimes he could do unexpected things that worked out for him. When he saw that Penny would be in the same class as him, he knew that someone like her wouldn't be interested in interacting with the other students. He figured she'd sit in the last 2 rows. "Smart, Dalton, smart," Kevin remarked as he gave him a thumbs up. Just as the students settled in, the professor walked into the classroom. From her appearance, she looked to be around 27 or 28 years old, and she looked very unapproachable. "Hello, everyone. I'm Professor Grace Murdoch, and I'll be your instructor for the next 4 years, she announced somberly. "The first thing that we need to do is to discuss our rules. There are a lot of very rich students here from some of the city's most prestigious families. That doesn't matter anymore. From now on, you'll only have one identity, and that is the student of the School for the Healing Arts. If you forget that and fall out of line, I'll make sure that you're expelled," she informed them in a very serious tone. "What do you mean by fall out of line?" one of the students blurted out. "If I think my teacher is very good looking, I can ask her out, can't I?" Some people from wealthy families are used to saying things without consequences. This guy still hadn't learned when to keep his mouth closed. Suddenly, Professor Murdoch slammed her book on the desk, and the entire classroom suddenly fell silent. With a very sour look on her face, Professor Murdoch walked over to the person who had disrupted the class and asked him, "What's your name?" "My name is Chase Rogers. Are you free on Friday night?" The young man answered confidently. "The heir to the Chicago hotel chain," Professor Murdoch asked coldly. That's me, Chase admitted proudly. The Rogers family wasn't quite as well off as the Steele family, but they still were considered to be very wealthy. Well, Mr. Rogers, you are hereby officially expelled from the School for the Healing Arts, Professor Murdoch informed him in a very dignified tone. Why are you doing this? Chase was stunned. You're a smart aleck and you're disrespectful. Now you can serve as an example to your former classmates. Professor Murdoch explained to him. She didn't have the time or the inclination to deal with nonsense like this. She took Chase's backpack, opened the window, and threw it out. Everyone was stunned when they saw her do this. The look on his face was priceless. Then she turned to Chase and told him, You can pick up your backpack on your way off campus. Professor Murdoch's expression didn't change at all. She returned to the podium and said to everyone very sternly, If you listen to me, you'll do well here. I will not put up with any disruptions or lack of respect, either for me or your fellow students. Otherwise, I guarantee that you won't be here very long. Nobody said a word. They just sat quietly, afraid to draw any attention to themselves. There's one more thing, she continued as she looked from one side of the classroom to the other. There was a fight on campus a little while ago. That wasn't the best decision for the first day of school. Everyone kept quiet, but they couldn't help looking over at Dalton and Kevin in the back row. They knew exactly what Professor Murdoch was talking about. Kevin looked down at his desk, hoping that she wouldn't notice him, but Dalton remained calm. He even looked around as if he didn't know who the professor was talking about. Everyone was wondering what Professor Murdoch would say next.